Welcome to the PP Show, where the D-Gens come to have discussions. Here at the PP Show, everyone has a voice, no matter how long you've traded in the markets. We love all opinions at the PP Show, and we hope you do too. Always remember, this show is mainly Welcome to the PP Show, where the D-Gens come to have discussions. Here at the PP Show, everyone has a voice, no matter how long you've traded in the markets. We love all opinions at the PP Show, and we hope you do too. Always remember, this show is mainly comprised of opinion, speculation, and entertainment. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show, you dildo enthusiasts. God bless Teddy and G-Merica. One last thing, always remember, talk is cheap. It takes
Great to see you guys. Hope you guys have been well, man, as we get together on another PP show, man, to talk about the goddamn stocks we love. So, good to see you guys tonight. Hope you guys have been well, and thank you for joining us here on a Friday evening, man. So, keep in mind tonight we have a lot of DD to process through, man. A lot of Bratya stuff. There's a lot of fucking posts kind of scattered here and there. Jake has a lot of great DD as well, and also Whoopass will be joining us here at the PP show. Now, Whoopass is not here yet. I'm not too sure where he's at, but as soon as we open the show, bring in some regulars. I'll give him a call if he's still not here, and hopefully he's still showing up tonight because he has a very good presentation that he gave me to showcase tonight. A lot of stuff pertaining to B. Riley's, HBC, things like that. So I hope that he's going to be here tonight, man. I hope we didn't fall asleep. So let's get into it, man. Let's dive into, well, first, let's get the legality out of the way, and we'll jump straight into the show, man. So keep in mind, man, I'm not a financial expert, nor am I a financial advisor. So please seek the avenues to do so. You're not going to find it here. A lot of this is opinion. A lot of this is speculation. A whole bunch of it is entertainment, if you haven't guessed it already. We like getting together. We like talking about the stock, and that's really all there is to it, man. So keep that in mind. Keep in mind, any guests who come to the show, man, nobody here is a professional. So if you hear any opinions, speculation, TA, things like that, keep in mind, man, nobody here is a professional. We like getting together. We like talking about the stock, and that's really all there is to it, man. So let's fucking dive into it tonight, man. Let's go ahead and grab some of these guys from backstage and bring them on. Chat, please give a warm welcome to none other than Michael. All right, what's going on, Michael? Good to see you tonight, my man.
Good to see you. Yeah, things are exciting.
Excellent. Yeah, it is. Are you playing any options, man, this week? I got to say, I did jump into, so I was talking about it earlier this week, maybe Monday or Wednesday, I can't remember, that based off of that CHWY block size order, I was going to buy some calls, and sure as hell I did. Got in about a 65, I think, $65 a contract, 65 cents. And sure enough, today they're at 94, man, on a Friday closing up this week. So I got to say, maybe there's something there in terms of those calls. Are you playing any calls? Are you playing anything Siri, GameStop, CHWY, or what's the word, man? Let's hear it.
I mean, I bought a couple Siri, like literally two, just for kicks and giggles.
Right on.
For, I don't know, a few weeks out because they were cheap and, might as well ride it. No, I didn't really buy that much. I have a few that are for later this month, which I think are going to hit with GameStop. I added one more for this week, and when it was at the very bottom, I just bought literally one GameStop contract for a $21 strike price, and it doubled up. So
nice.
There we go.
All right, there you fucking have it, man. Excellent stuff. Yeah. Again, earlier, I swear, I want to say it was Monday. This whole week's been kind of blurred together for me. I don't know if it was last week when we kind of crashed down to $18 a share when it came to GameStop, but we bought them to $18 and we've recovered to over 22, I think 60 now at the end of the week. I got to say it's pretty good move, man, in terms of the recovery. CHWY as well, bottom at 20. I think it's at 26 right now. So something is obviously happening here. And again, what people want to do with their investments, whether they play options, buy shares, whatever it may be, do what's best for you, man. Some people like us, we like to play options on top of holding shares long. So I don't know, do whatever works for you, man. So yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Kind of interesting you brought up CHWY, because CHWY went all the way back up to $27, and for a long time, GameStop and CHWY were literally pegged to the cent. And someone posted today that they had other tokenized shares that just dropped for GME. And so, it makes me wonder if that's why GME and CHWY got disconnected, is the ones that dropped the backed FI tokens back on the 17th, July 17th, and then more today. And so maybe that's what's causing the depeg.
Yeah, I mean, something's obviously happening here. So, but yeah, I mean, excellently said. All right, let's go ahead and jump into it tonight. Let's go ahead and welcome Sloppy onto the show. Looks like we also have Wally Buck backstage with us too, man. Let's go ahead and bring in Wally. And also, Whoopass actually did just get back to me. He said, yes, just sorting out some camera shit. I guess he's trying to sort that out right now. So it looks like he just got here too. So why don't we go ahead and bring all the fellas in here? Sloppy, Wally Buck, and also Whoopass. Or actually, wait a second, because I actually have a special intro for Whoopass specifically for tonight. So Wally Buck, why don't you ride in with Sloppy here? Chat, welcome Sloppy and Wally Buck. All right, we got Sloppy and also Wally Buck with us tonight. Wally, how you doing, man? We haven't seen you on the PP Show in quite some time, man. How's life going? How are the trades treating you, man?
Life's good, man. The market's brutal. It's fun. It's beautiful. It's ugly. Had a emotional couple of weeks. Made a couple grand this week, but left like 20 grand on the table by some contracts on Tuesday instead of Friday. But you you live and you learn. So happy to be here. Happy to be hanging with the boys tonight. I've got my scotch, got something in my mug over here.
Excellent.
Gonna stay hydrated tonight and can't wait to just hear what's going on. Some really juicy stuff has happened the past couple days, past couple weeks, and I think we're close, boys.
Well said, man. Yeah, I agree. And I agree with you, man. Sometimes, trading some of these securities, things like that, they can be all over the place. So I get it, man, right there with you, man, in terms of some of those option trades. So let's go ahead and bring in the man of the hour here. We have Whoopass with us tonight. Again, he made a fantastic presentation for us tonight, fellas. Wow, the amount of work that went in this tonight, you guys are going to love. So let's go ahead and play Whoopass's intro here for tonight. It's specially made for Whoopass. Hope you enjoy it, man. All right, we got a Whoopass with us tonight. Whoopass, how the fuck are we doing, man? It's been quite some time.
That it has, a couple of years. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you. Perfect, man. Excellent stuff. The last time I think that we saw you was actually on Beyond Uranus almost 2 years ago when me and Real kind of started Beyond Uranus. I was a co-host on the show. You were actually our first guest, man, that we had. So I'm glad you're finally making your debut to the PP Show, man.
Sorry about the tardiness, man. I was getting my tendies behind the dumpster.
Right on, man. Right on. Excellent. So you made a very, very good presentation that I do want to get into tonight. Let me go ahead and share it here on the screen and we'll kind of work our way through it. To my knowledge, a lot of it is heavily based around HBC. There's some B. Riley stuff mentioned in there. A lot of the stuff kind of tracking back to RC. Is there anything that you want to tell the chat out here tonight before we dive into it, what they are looking to expect with this thing that you made here?
Sure. So I think the key thing here is the DD is meant to give you a walkthrough demonstration on how you can go through and check a lot of the information that's been released in the past, but also the updated current information that you now have from picking up things in the dockets and the court transcripts and all that kind of content that's really given us a little bit of a light under the microscope type of feel. Mm-hmm. And it's designed in a way that everyone can kind of choose how they want to go and explore further, depending on what interests them or what things they want to pick apart. Some of the content within this DD will be assumption based or estimates. So like you can go digging into it a lot more to find, does the math line up better? Can we actually narrow down the float? Who might be the mystery buyers or owners of the amount of shares that have been distributed? Like there's lots of things that you can dig into, but yeah, the two big key things are probably going to be taking a look at the prospectus stuff that was connected with HBC and then the B. Riley stuff, which is really interesting.
Excellent. All right. Yeah, let's dive into it, man. So this was created by Whoopass here. It says, choose your own adventure DD, the story of HBC. And at any time that you want to cut me off, please feel free so we can expand on some of these areas here tonight.
Yeah, no worries. I don't think you need to read through everything completely because it's going to be a wall of text for you. So
yeah, that's all right. We're used to it here at the PP Show, man. You spent the time making the fucking making the presentation. We're gonna read every goddamn word that's in it. So it says forward, the art of DD. Diving in to do your own due diligence can be daunting, but it's necessary. It goes on to say, when you do it, try to keep notes and topics you search on by. As you research, be open-minded to how the other side can think, ways to do that. Be mindful of your biases, acknowledge them, lean into against them. Try using a logic decision matrix. This is usually a 4 possibility outcome, like binary on off 0001 1011. Assumption tables are great too. They help identify rationalizations of situations. All right, let's dive into the stuff here. So just so people know, interactive DD exercise guide. If you see the text like this, then you would search the text between the quotations and the filing. I've highlighted key parts from text from filings in yellow, orange, or blue to help differentiate between content. Anytime you see different colors on the same segment, it's to help you track multiple trains of thought. Any text in green is the assumed questions you'd ask. Feel free to make your own. All right. So a little bit of background, 2022, background, what was reported. So January of 2022 to March of 2022, Ryan Cohen buys into Bed Bath & Beyond, as we know. March 2022 comes around, RC sends a letter to the board, gets a cooperation agreement as well. June 2022, Bed Bath & Beyond CEO Mark Trinan steps down. July of 2022, Bed Bath & Beyond names Sue Gov the interim CEO. RC supports. August of 2022, RC exits his position on August 15th through the 16th, which is actually, I was just about to say, that's today. That's 2 years ago today when he started to essentially sell off his position. Bed Bath & Beyond secure funding through Philo with 6th Street lending, $375 million. Bed Bath & Beyond announced cost savings from cutting back on lease, workforce, and logistics spending. GameStop also reported winding down a distribution center around that same time. And just might I add, in terms of that distribution center that they had closed down, I think from what I recall, it was about 15 or 20 minutes from the Bed Bath distribution center as well. Yep. So November to December of 2022, a bond exchange deal offering. And as you guys know, that is what essentially happened. So this is basically just an explanation here. I'll let you guys just read that for a moment. If you do want to search this stuff, you basically would Google this that you see here, and you guys can find a lot of this information there. All right. So let's get into the nitty gritty. 2022 background, what we have learned in 2024. Okay. Reverse chronological order, December 22 to January of 2022. RC put in an offer connected with those bond offerings January of 2023. The value was around $400 million. 6th Street Lending's main purpose of the Philo was become the agent. RC sold his position to a private holder, not the open market. Bed Bath & Beyond tried to accelerate the share buyback despite being cash flow negative in an attempt to force RC over 10% ownership and insider status. Bed Bath & Beyond tried to corner RC with suggestive hearsay opportunities of insider information. RC's letter to the board stopped a baby sale, suspected Cerebrus, I think is how you say it, pitch book rumor set to open just a few days after when the CA was announced. Receipts for the skeptics, part 1, that says March 27th of 2022, a deal for Bed Bath & Beyond was canceled, potential linking to Cerebrus here, as you guys can see. Let me zoom in just a little bit here. And here we do have it listed via PitchBook merger/acquisition, 27th of March, 2022. Looks like it was canceled here.
And you can see there that the co-op agreement in the next slide, it actually came in on the 24th. So literally days before. So
interesting. Yeah, you're actually right. So about 4 days before, it looks like, or no, I'm sorry, 3 days before. Wait, yes. So it says receipts for the skeptics part 2, the cooperation agreement. The cooperation agreement, this agreement is made and entered into as of March 24, 2022, by and among Bed Bath & Beyond and the entities and natural persons set forth in the signature pages here too, collectively RC Ventures, each of the company, the RC Ventures, a party to this agreement, and collectively the parties. Okay. And as Whoopass just pointed out, this was a few days prior to that getting canceled, okay, which I think is very important.
Okay, so I'll probably help you out here on the assumption table because it'll probably go easier.
Yes.
For anybody that's never worked with an assumption table, the idea is you're trying to cross-reference behind the scenarios that you're kind of considering and the players that are involved. So there are many different ways to kind of do this. Sometimes you do it in terms of business and evaluating the types of products or solutions that you go after. Other times you're trying to determine the kind of like a differential analysis between all the factors to see which is the best option or which is the best path to take. In this circumstance, how I'm leveraging it is I'm taking a look at the 4 scenarios that kind of kicked off as the major stuff that happened in 2022, and taking a look at the 4 major players that had a role in those particular scenarios. Taking a look at, well, how do we feel sentiment-wise about their actions in that moment? So if you wanted to read this, the easiest way is to probably take a look from a row factor. So going across, looking at the individual and how they basically transpired throughout the year with each of their respective deals. The very first one, obviously, is RC, because I think he really is the main character to the story of how a lot of this has transpired, both in Bed Bath & Beyond and with the other stocks that are kind of linked in with all this stuff in the basket. So when he came in and did the cooperative agreement, everybody naturally kind of looked at that and said, hey, this is pretty good. Activist investor getting involved, a lot of retail excited about that. So general sentiment was good. When you take a look at when he exits his position, got hit with a lot of bad and segment. There's mixed feelings around it, although that was because we were thought he was bailing on us, and we were kind of gaslit to believe that. So there's some more information on the next page with a screenshot shows cases why that was, and some hints towards how he kind of approached the scenario with it. When you take a look at the bond offering, at first, we wouldn't have necessarily known him to be involved with that because at that point, he had technically exited his position. But now that we know, since with the court filings, that he made an LBO offer, he would have had to be involved during that. So for all of us, we're looking at him in hindsight and saying, that's a good scenario. So the overall appeal with Ryan Cohen is that he is a good player in this, obviously, not attempting to do something malicious and nefarious for us. I don't need to really tell that to anybody, but
sure,
it's nice to see the proof. When you take a look at 6th Street, they're interesting because every sort of action that you see across the board kind of paints in a positive light. So you can almost unanimously identify that their decision making in this process has been with the intent to do something good for the company, as well as all of the parties involved to benefit from it. They weren't around, obviously, for the cooperation agreement. They didn't necessarily have a position to take on RC exiting his position in August, but they did come out around that time with the actual Philo deal. So that's just kind of a note to keep in reference. And I think it's also important to make reference that they specifically provided $375 million, and that number is not by chance. When you take a look at the original ABL deal down on the bottom of the link there, that is the SEC filing with JP Morgan. And if you search 375, you'll only find it, I think, twice.
You said 375?
Yep. There it is.
Yes. Yeah.
So when you read this segment, this clause, it's talking about the expansion of commitments. It's basically outlining that they must expand a minimum increments of $5 million onto the loan, that it has to be a first in, last out, so a Philo facility under it, and that there can't be any other file in place of it. So these guys set up the maximum amount, which it says there, the 375 does not exceed. So all that just say, just like 6th Street is a part of this, but they're intentionally a part of this. And I think as we discover more and more throughout the bankruptcy process, all the dockets and the transcripts from the court hearings, it's massive to see how this has transpired.
Yeah, well said. And also, sorry to cut you off there. Some people are saying, okay, PP, just have Whoopass walk through each of his slides because you'll probably be able to better explain it. So that will probably save some time as well. So, and again, no rush or anything like that. Some people are also asking out in the chat, Is there a copy of this? Yes, we will upload it after the show, so more eyes can get on it this weekend as well. I know some of the text is a little bit small here and there. I'll try to tinker with it as we kind of go along and zoom in, but just keep that in mind, fellas. All right. All right.
Also,
Yeah,
real
ahead,
quick, you mentioned Cerebus, and I looked them up, and turns out in 2010, they bought a hospital in Massachusetts, a hospital chain, went on an acquisition spree, and then in 2016 they did a lease back. So they sold all the properties to their friends, and then they bailed, and it went bankrupt in like 2020. So it's just kind of interesting how they use the same formula. So it's like not a surprise to see them here when that same thing happened.
Yeah. So if you want to slide back up to the previous slide there, PPL,
yes,
I'll just finish the wrap up there.
Sorry.
So no, it's okay. You're good. So as we go through the rest of the year, the bond offering with 6th Street, I think it's a fairly safe assumption to know that they were probably in a good position there because they had no objection and they clearly supported the deal. And then, of course, when you take a look at the FILO and the ABL overall, they are viewed as good. But I think the key, and this is the most important thing, and Jake has mentioned this with his DD in recent weeks, it's about the fact that they took over as the agent on the ABL. That was always the major intent behind the FILO agreement. And when you start to see that they've provided the maximum amount capable when they proceeded to set that up, and how they took calculated steps, like all of the parties involved here that are on the good side that we presume, it starts to really paint the picture of how this is carrying out.
So let me ask you something real quick too. Do you think that JPM knew, because obviously they were going to check their finances, see how they're spending money, see where there's like, holes in kind of what's going on in their business. Do you think that JPM knew giving them $1 billion for the ABL that they would not be able to pay this back?
It's a great question, and I think you'll probably get that answered very effectively when you start to see the B. Riley section near the end of this. So
Gotcha.
it'll actually tie in the Cerberus stuff too, and people will be like, "Wait, what the fuck?" Like real fast.
Yeah. All right on.
But to answer your question, I do think it was part of the plan in terms of trying to create the demise.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to bore people too much on the board side because we don't like to talk more about the board than we need to. They're a pain in our ass enough. But generally speaking, when you take a look at all of the factors of what they've been involved with, none of it really looks good. I mean, they're on a technicality with RC's exiting position with not having a stance simply because, well, what are you supposed to feel good or bad about that? But I mean, they almost were praying and knew of a pump that was coming. It was weird. Based on the recent court transcripts and documents. And then when you take a look at the FILO, I mean, sure, they're the user, the debtor of it. It's not a good or bad. But as I mentioned again, they signed that deal. I think it was initiated in 2019 and signed officially and announced in June of 2020. So I think I missed that timestamp. But you get to see the date actually on the link. It's right there at the top. It tells you exactly when it was signed. And when you take a look at JP Morgan, like, I mean, not that anybody needed this heads up, but we all feel that they're a bad actor in a lot of this. And every step of the way, the actions that they did kind of signifies that. I mean, you could try and say, well, how can you view them as a bad actor when they're just getting engaged for the cooperation agreement? I'm like, well, no, the right answer in that circumstance, if some company comes to you and you're not that company's board, is sorry, that's a private matter with you and your company. I don't know why the fuck you're talking to me. So I think all of those emails and everything else with the board trying to engage about, well, how do we deal with Ryan Cohen is
right.
Damn.
It's also reading the Cerebus thing. Apparently, one of their big transactions was a deal they made with JP Morgan to handle all their securities for their company, the Cerebus. So it's just like not a coincidence that, if JP Morgan never actually purchased the shares back, that the lease back would be the kiss of death. Like obviously the share buybacks are bad, and especially the timing of them, but like the really bad part is the lease back. That's just like, that's a cash burn that I don't know that any company could really recover from.
Which is crazy because when you look into some of the filings and the dockets, actually it's not the dockets, just the filings, the AKs and either 10, I think it's the 10Qs that were released for 2022, you start to see that they had recently signed in 2021 agreements to get a new distribution facility that wouldn't kick in until 2023. So this whole saga, you're seeing both sides, the good side and the bad side, methodically thinking things out years in advance and it's been a masterful chess game to kind of watch.
Yeah, because it's like they have a backup and everything. I mean, this is even like politically motivated. It was the vice president to George Bush actually was one of the people on the board and stuff. So it's just crazy that's like that they would come in, then Bain Capital would come next, right? It's like, oh well, Cerebus failed, they got blocked, and it's like, okay, well we'll have Bain come in. It's like, what is going on?
Yeah. Okay, PP, we could slide to the next slide and
perfect. Yes, yep. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide real quick. We have Salty Lizard out there with the PP note here for 15 membership for 15 months. Appreciate your support, Salty. Pardon me. Where do I donate to Michael's toe fund? I love you, PP. I love you. I love more misses. Right on. Yeah, we need to get some money collected for Michael's towed car. We also got SZ out there with the 20. Appreciate the love, SZ. All right, let's go ahead and scroll down here to the next section. Purple Heart. Yes.
So this is the reason why I don't think people should be dismayed about RC selling in August 2022 for Bed Bath & Beyond. 4 days before he sold, he sends out the Purple Heart tweet. Now, there's been lots of tinfoil DD done on this in regards to what that represents, who it might be connected to and all the different pieces. But knowing the fact that he was going to jump on the sword to sell his stock, and then that we later find out that it goes through a private sale that didn't actually go right to market, I think it's pretty evident that he's representing through his own channels and codes to try and identify to the masses, his shareholders, that this is what he's trying to do, that there's a plan in place. So you can go to the next slide.
Sounds
Which,
good.
I mean, could be that if GameStop gets baby instead of RC Ventures, right, it would be that he would just be sharing that profit.
Oh, we'll get there. We'll get there.
Real quick. Also, this is a message to Whoopass from Eileen. Eileen says, can you tell Whoopass he has been an inspiration and beacon for me in this whole saga? I'm sure a lot of people relate to that. Early on when I eventually got into the Bed Bath sub, you were one of like the top DD writers at the time, writing tinfoil connections, things like that, alongside Biggie, Realize, things like that. So a lot of love here tonight to Whoopass, again, an OG when it comes to the Bed Bath community. All right, 2023 fireworks. Let's hear it.
Yeah, I'm one of the stupid OGs that decided to show up on the Bed Bath sub 3,000 people. Good times.
Wow, that's
early. Real early. So what happened in 2023 now is that we've now had a chance to see some of the details come up from the dockets and the court filings, but I think the hearing transcripts have been probably some of the most eye-opening stuff, and in 2024 especially, because this has given us behind the scenes of what these experts and each respective side of this battle have basically been trying to say, and slowly but surely we're starting to see more stuff be released from the redactions. But of course, we're here for the PP show, and the PP show likes to look at the biggest, darkest stuff, all of the redaction things that are being blocked out. So we know the question that everyone wants to tackle today, and that is what to think about our HBC, because they're the party to date that we still don't have a real good, clear idea on, well, where do they sit, right? So let's go. Let's dive into it.
All right, let's see.
First, I'm going to set this up. So in February of 2023, this was basically just after the company had identified that they were going to be late with their filing, and then they filed their 10Q late in January 2023, and that's when we found out that there was special events on January 13th, and then we also found out through eventually, I think about a month or so later, when there was the Canadian creditor protection, which is the equivalent of Chapter 11 in the US for the Canadian side entities. Well, they had a factum there, and that's what's linked there. Alvarez and Marshall is the company doing the representation on the Canadian side, and that factum was very interesting. It's basically representation from Holly Etlin, who proceeded to then identify all of the different states and elements of what was going on with Bed Bath & Beyond at the time. And in there, you find out that they're under cash dominion. Now, I went and did a lookup on this with all of the filings that were released over the time, and I checked multiple SEC filings, 10Qs, 8Ks, all that. Not a single one now seems to make reference to cash dominion coming from JPM. And I thought they did previously. So the only place that I've actually been able to find this and see it is through the bankruptcy side on the Canadian creditor protection case.
Really?
Yes, very interesting. It almost feels like some stuff might be being swept under the rug at some point here.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what you're hearing. That's what you see. And we know that then the bond interest payments were coming up. Now, I tried to dig a lot on this. I'm not a bonds expert, and I could see some of the terms related to the bonds, but they didn't have the rate at which the maturity paybacks were happening for the interest. I did an estimate of 6% APR, which is pretty conservative. I mean, if you look at a conservative bond in the market, it's probably 4%. You go to the stock market, you get on average 8%. So 6 seemed like a pretty good number. And when you did that and you calculated their obligation, it was probably going to be, I think it was actually around 26 to 28 million. So it's around, give or take, 30 to 40 million, depending on what that percentage APR would actually be. And that's how much money they had to come up with, I think, by March 1st of 2022 or 2023. So with cash dominion in place, they're not able to do anything with that money because it has to run through JP Morgan first. JP Morgan would have had to bless them paying the interest payments of the bonds, which they gladly would have done, thinking that they had this all under wraps to sink the company, because it basically would have put the money back into their players who had the bonds. But not only that, Bed Bath & Beyond needed to get JP Morgan off as the agent of the ABL when they wanted to go into bankruptcy. Because if they didn't, all of a sudden, all the control result would stick with JP Morgan. And we've recently seen the outcomes of all of that. Again, some more great DD coming from Jake that outlines JP Morgan was very startled and confused, maybe even surprised that they no longer had to be the agent of the ABL because they were paid off, and they didn't expect that. And that's only possible because at the very same time, Holly Etlin came into the story and replaced as the CFO officially. She was an intern prior to that. She became the official CFO, which meant things didn't necessarily have to run through JPM on the cash dominion, because they would have had to sign off on her becoming the CFO and then be reporting to them, which means it would have given her more autonomy to do that. So with RC being denied his holdings with the bonds and trying to do that with the LBO, clearly, he needed another way to secure baby. And now we're going to dig into that. Next slide. If you search that text there, you can find up some articles of around the time frame. There was one that kind of gives some excerpts from her testimonies during that time frame when she was up and doing the court hearings. But basically, they appointed her the CFO and the CRO. The CRO just before, so the chief records officer, I think is what that is, just before the bankruptcy, the day before. And she was the CFO conveniently on February 7th. What also happened on February 7th? You can go to the next slide.
I want to say it was the HBC deal, but I could be wrong.
No, you're right on point. We're leaving you here. So, February 6th, Bed Bath & Beyond goes and files a new prospectus. And in this, it contains a bunch of information. It's probably one of the most sophisticated filings that have been released. Actually, I shouldn't say that. The original one didn't have much information. The amended that came with it had a ton of information. And if you click on that sec link, it'll show it's giving you malform. Yeah.
Looks like the link might be broken on it.
Okay, we'll have to fix. I'll take a look into that and see if we can fix it.
Okay.
Technically speaking, if you search,
there's some L missing at the end of HGM.
Oh yeah, there is actually.
There could be. Yeah, it could be.
Yeah, hold on. Let me try that. Can I?
Right. You'd have to right click on it and try and edit it.
Yeah. Let me.
Could also be because you made it a PDF too, right? Yeah, it could also be that too.
Oh no, it was an HTML. Hold on, I'm gonna share this.
No, I mean like because this originally was done in a Google presentation thing, so it might have.
I have it here if you want me to pull up.
It doesn't matter. It's just the reference of I want to show people like a different look of what the SEC archives have in some cases. Like a lot of times you'll go and you'll search and you'll get individual dockets or filings or information. In this particular instance, the original prospectus that was filed contains just a very small blurb for an 8K, but then there's some subsequent extended files that you have to manually and individually go into. And that was basically before they compiled everything. And it's important to understand how that transpires because then algorithms have to read those things individually and try and piece it together without necessarily knowing all of that stuff.
So this is what it sends us to.
Yes. Right. Yeah. So like you can see the 8K amended. If you were to click on that.
Right here. 8K.
Yep. It doesn't give you very much information. It just gives you the notes of what's been done, and then that's it. Right. But now if you go back and you take a look at, say, the first extended file.
Which?
Yep. It says 3EX31. That one.
Oh,
there.
yes.
Yep.
3.1. Yeah.
Yep. Take a look at all the information that's in this document or in this file. So here's where all the details actually were when they made all this stuff.
Right.
And this was done intentionally. It was done intentionally because it was designed to make it so that the algorithms couldn't necessarily process the information all at once to figure out how to feel sentiment-wise on this. Part of this whole exercise was to try and showcase that the market is being manipulated by algorithms, whether we want it to be or not.
Yep.
And not necessarily for intentional malicious nature, but it's just we don't necessarily have the autonomy in the market that we should, based on what should be happening. So,
all right, let me re-pull this up for us. And yeah, you're right. You know, like that's really one of the biggest things that when it comes to algos, they can kind of scan these documents very quickly, right? Less than a second, right? And all of a sudden you see how it kind of reacts to the market, a lot of dumping, things like that. People who have been, you know, involved in this stock or even hell, even GameStop or other stocks can see the same thing. Filings drop, the stock absolutely gets obliterated at times. And that's a lot of it is due to these like algos, right?
Well, even Roaring Kitty, DFV, Pimp Daddy, whoever you want to call him to you, he demonstrated with his Twitter and everything, or X, with you know, just posting one word, and all of a sudden the markets just go to shit, right?
Yep.
So before we jump to this slide, just go back to the previous one. I just want to quickly highlight. No, it's okay. You're good. There's a lot of content here. When we go through some of this stuff, you'll see some of these slides. They'll have content that is highlighted. The highlights are meant to kind of showcase the things that are important based on what was in those filings. They are pulled from either a docket or a SEC filing. In this particular one, there's two things that I want you to pay attention to. Of course, we're highlighting the date, but because they're saying on February 7th, they issued all of that stuff, which is the same time frame that Holly Etlin became officially the CFO. But this is all being done through B. Riley as the securities underwriter, which is really interesting. And if people aren't familiar with what an underwriter is, they're basically someone who helps facilitate the legal agreement of that exchange that's happening between whatever the service is, whether it's a financial vessel or it's some sort of trade or exchange of services, all that kind of stuff. And then the last piece is kind of really to understand that the common stock warrants are available to be exercised immediately at the option of the holder. And that the exercise price must be $6.15 per share. That is a fixed price. It does not adjust based on whatever the stock price was. So that meant if the stock price had ever gone higher than $6.15, the person who had these common stock warrants would get a deal because they'd be getting the stock cheaper than what it's actually trading for. And it also says that it will expire 5 years from the issuance date. We'll get back to that.
Okay.
So you can now slide to the next one. When you take a look at the amended prospectus supplement, and this is the first time because it actually got amended twice, this is where you would see, so like if you click on that link, this is where you would start to see all of the modifications. Oh, okay, never mind. We're not going to go for that game. Don't worry about it.
I can put it in and still get it up while you're explaining it.
Yeah, you'll get all of they used in some cases red dash lines and blue markers for text to identify where they changed and what they changed, how it changed, all that kind of stuff. And so when you start to really dig through this, especially this one here, there is a ton of stuff that gets changed and amended, and that confused the algorithms as well. It's the reason why the price, especially in early February, was wonky. It was really, really low, and then all of a sudden it shot up high. I think it doubled in price at some point. All in the same day. Like, it was crazy. But when you're looking into this, there's really only one key thing that you want to learn. And this is leading up to the proof of why HBC is a big, good player in this circuit, at least operating with a good player. Now, you wouldn't have been able to find it based on searching 0.716. You would have probably looked for it as conversion price. And if you look up conversion price, you would have seen it 68 times. But by the time you hit the seventh time, you'll see where the 0716 comes from. And you only have that, I think, twice in the document. So what is that? You can shift to the next way.
Okay.
It's all good.
Yep.
The rule of 0.716, it's a price threshold. It is the lower end at which the prices of the shares for the warrants could technically be exercised. Now, I know to a lot of people, if you're a crayon connoisseur, you might only think that's just a couple digits away from 741, which is fair. But I don't know if they deliberately chose it to be like that. What matters, though, is that there were two explicit conditions for being able to convert the shares. And that is that it had to be greater than 71 cents, essentially, and it had to be greater than 92% of the lowest volume weighted average over a 10-period consecutive trading days. Now, when you look at that, if we want to jump to the next slide. I apologize, my French here, s'il vous plaît. It's a Canadian reference joke. When you look at that information, there's basically the high of February saw $5.86. The low saw $1.41. Even if you took the 10 lowest trading days of February and added all that up and then proceeded to take the average, it would be about $1.49. And that's relatively close to the lowest point in the month, which is kind of crazy. But it means that HBC would have at no point during the entire duration that they were collecting warrants been able to exercise for shares, for common shares that would be diluted into the market for a price less than $6.15. They would have always been paying more to get that share than what was actually on the market that day. And the link there that you'll get, anybody who's kind of looking at the content here, it's basically a price historical data sheet. We don't necessarily need to look at it right now, but we'll get to it later when we take a look just before the B. Riley stuff. That is where you can kind of take a look at that information on your own for the month of February in 2023 for Bed Bath & Beyond. And you can do this for any stock and take a look, especially any of the ones that are manipulated in the basket, to see how their price ranges fluctuate. But it's very interesting, the stuff that took place in February for Bed Bath & Beyond. Next slide.
Real quick, boss.
Sure.
If my memory serves me correct, did they not kind of continue moving the goalposts? You might get there, but didn't they exercise shares and keep sort of lowering the requirements? Because I remember at that time thinking, oh my gosh, the floor is in. Kept on buying beyond that. But it sounds like you're going to get to it, so continue.
Yes, they did. There was one amendment in which they adjusted floor to that 71 cents period, because I think previously it was around $1, which would make sense in February, where it was like, okay, you can't exercise if the price drops below $1. And the reason why they did that as part of the prospectus is that they wanted to make sure that whoever bought the preferred A series stock warrants was not going to then proceed to just dilute into the market. And that's exactly what this means, is that it was a bear trap. It was intentionally designed more specifically as a fraud trap. When you take a look at this deal overall, it looks like what they normally call a death spiral. And HBC looks like a shady partner because they don't have a clean history, and they're the ones collecting the warrants. And then you look at B. Riley, and they look like a shady partner because they're the one doing the underwriting. And when we get to them later, you're going to be like, holy shit. Like, I legitimately mean you're going to be like, holy shit. The price of the VWAP ended up near the low of the month, implying that the shares could have been exercised at the lowest amount possible, which would be a short seller's benefit. And of course, everybody led you to believe this at the time. They were all telling you, it's a death spiral, the company's done, all this stuff is good. Mm-hmm. Now, they would continue to drop that price in the day-to-day trading and the closing until it hit that below that 71 cent threshold on March 29th, which it came to 59 cents. And what would happen is immediately the next day on March 30th, we would get another amended filing, which just seems kind of weird. Mm-hmm. Just saying. If you want to go to the next slide.
Okay.
This leads into the determination. The termination, which is the next prospectus filing, which is interesting because this is where the Bed Bath & Beyond announced the $300 million at the money offering by B. Riley. However, if you looked up at the very top left of it, it identifies that it's an amendment of the previous agreement. And that's because they're terminating the HBC deal. But that's not just because they're terminating the HB deal. This is where this gets really crazy. First, we see that they've terminated the HB deal, but then they're also doing a $300 million offering with the same underwriter, which doesn't make sense. Second, you see that they terminated the Jeffries at the money offering that was done back in August of 2022. So we're like, almost 6 months later, and we're like, wait, that's still going? So who bought that stuff, right? Then you see later, like when we get the information out of the dockets and everything that's reported in bankruptcy, Bed Bath & Beyond goes and says that they never collected a single dollar from B. Riley, which that's when the people started to say, wait a minute, so is the TSO not 700 and some odd million, but actually only 430? So based on the language of how the deal was terminated with HBC, I think that's what you need to look more closely at. And you'll see that this really mattered, like the way they set this up. So, it's the next slide.
Okay.
So how much money did HBC actually collect from, or did BBBY collect from HBC? If you take a look at that termination clause text information from the updated amendment on March 30th, you would see that they claim to have gotten $135,014,000, and that they proceeded to then get into an exchange agreement because they didn't feel like they would be able to exercise the warrants in a future date and receive the cash proceeds, which kind of hints later to the whole element of the bankruptcy. But I want to highlight that point of exchange agreement because I don't think you find it if you look it up in any sort of SEC filing. And I don't believe we've seen it in dockets yet. And it's possible that that information is being redacted right now. It's entirely possible that it's completely private, but I find it really hard to be a private agreement in which is not publicly accessible based on the fact that they're entitled to common stock shares from this. Mm-hmm. But essentially they were converting, Bed Bath & Beyond came into an agreement with the holder of the company warrants saying, we will give you 10 million shares of common stock and you'll be entitled to receive an additional 5 million shares of common stock upon receipt of the shareholder approval of the proposed reverse split, which never happened.
Correct.
Now, we would look at this and we might say, well, given that they terminated this agreement, shouldn't that exchange agreement also be terminated? But given this is the text that's telling you that they terminated the agreement, technically speaking, that exchange agreement is existing post that process. And this is the reason why this becomes really interesting is because we don't know what is in the language of that exchange agreement. I believe a lot of what's redacted in the stuff connected with HBC today is that agreement.
Yeah, you could be onto something there, actually.
Another key thing that you want to take from this is that all of the warrant holdings that HBC had as either as proxy or for themselves had no voting rights until they were converted into common shares. Mm-hmm. And why is that important? Because when you have a share that has no voting rights, it has to be identified through a different CUSIP number. So that CUSIP number ends up allowing you to identify who has what amount of shares under which classification. And that became a real sore spot when they started leading into the bankruptcy filings, trying to identify people who are going to be part of different voting groups. So there's that kind of tidbit if you want to dig into it. We'll jump to the next slide.
Okay. Well, like, what a fucking excellent presentation, Whoopass. I mean, I got to say, like, we're getting a lot of love out in the chat. I got to say, it's a very thorough presentation, probably the best that anyone's come here to the show prepared with. So I got to say, hats off to you, Whoopass. Go ahead.
I appreciate the compliments. So if we take a look back and we remember the deal, remember, $6.15 is the price that has to be. It's a fixed price. But it also said that they will expire 5 years from issuance. Mm-hmm. There's an entire possibility that in that exchange agreement, there's possible common share warrants. Because remember, they were trading the preferred A-series share warrants for that 10 million and 5 million. It said nothing about anything with the common shares. And the common shares could have technically been carried over. Who knows? We don't know the details of that exchange agreement. And when you remember that neither of them give voting rights, it's that unique way to tell between all of this stuff, so that there's almost a way to look behind the scenes and see, well, what's actually exchanging hands between people. So hence the fraud trap. Now, when you take a look at the money piece, okay, HBC did 135 million. That's what they basically gave to Bed Bath & Beyond. And that was an exchange for, based on what Holly Etlin has testified here and what's in the filings, as 23,685 shares of Series A convertible. Now, I will caveat this and say that 23,685 might actually be more than just HBC. Like, there was, I think, a group of up to 30 people who bought small amounts of preferred stock warrants. I don't know how many of they bought the preferred A series, but either way, we're going to just assume HBC has the full amount, because it doesn't matter. This is estimates. It kind of helps with the ballpark. So that would work out to about 5,700 lots of preferred A series warrants. And the real question then becomes, well, what does that get you? And of course, the filings will show you that. If you go to the next slide.
Okay. Real quick, let me just read these back.
Yeah,
here.
no, go for your thing.
We got Ace Ventura out there with the 2. Michael's feet picks equals profit. We also got Loss out there with the 2. DFV, if you're here, can I get a cheers, everybody? Right on, man. Right on. I'm sure the guy totally watches the fucking show. He used the PP fucking intro, man. You know, he loves that goddamn song. All right, go ahead, Whoopass.
So when you search on the filing, and I believe this one here is the amended prospectus, or it might be I think it's the amended prospectus. You won't be able to get it to work this.
Yeah, we'll have to fix those links.
Yeah, we'll fix it up. I think it's just because it's converted to PDF and it's screwing. It's making it a local link or something. If you went searching for number of shares, as if any common person would try and search that, you won't find too much, because it'd be very vague. I think there's like hundreds of references in the document. But when you explicitly look for purchase common stock, you only get 13 hits. And the good news is that what you're looking for is right there at the beginning. It tells you exactly how much the common stock warrants will give you based on its exchange. And it tells you it will be equal to the sum of a 10% of the number of common stock issuable conversions, as well as a 50% of the aggregate of number of shares of common stock issued upon conversion of the preferred stock. So it's basically giving you a threshold of how much stock would actually be convertible based on the stock warrant, and that makes it a floating number, which makes it incredibly difficult to determine.
Right.
But we can use ChatGPT to help us out here to give a demonstration. So for anybody that's a math whiz, you can see the next slide. It'll kind of give you a breakdown of how this works and what it looks like as an example. Now, if you're not a math wizard, or if you're going through all of this stuff and you're like, okay, like GTFO here, don't worry. You don't have to understand this. The only thing you really need to understand is the conclusion, and that's where it says warrants can convert to will depend on the specific conversion rate. So now you know the next thing you're going to be searching for, and that's the conversion rate. And if we go to the next slide, we can pick up the I like the crickets.
I think that's like literally great. ABC just joined us, and that was perfect timing. ABC, what's going on? We're here with Whoopass tonight. How you doing tonight, man?
I'm good. I've been watching Whoopass. I just got to tell you, my man, you are the reason I got into this play with your DD 2 years ago. So kudos to you. I blame you for everything, my man.
That's fair. My wife blames me for everything too. I promise, for all the people who are experiencing this, first of all, I sincerely apologize if I am the reason you're here, simply because I never meant for anybody to endure this much pain. But
we like
all
it.
Of you, yes, we must. We very must. But when it is all said and done, and when you start to see all these pieces collected, I think it's going to change your life. Everybody probably already has experienced a life-changing element to get to this point, but once you've gone past this saga. Once we get to the other side of whatever mountain we're climbing on here, the world's going to look different, and you're going to take it with just an entirely different attitude. And every single person here is the future to what is transpiring before our eyes. There's a reason why you have people, high priority people like Bill Pulte, Larry Chen, Keith Gill, Ryan Cohen. These people are in your corner, and they are trying, and they're not the only ones. There's people behind the scene. They are grooming you for what the future is about to bring. So kudos to all of you if you're still here and you're still involved. Right, diamond hands, baby.
Hell yeah. That's the fucking way it goes.
Exactly. So when you search for the conversion rate, just like ChatGPT mentioned, it is shitty because you're going to find a few more hits than you probably reasonably like to read through, and that could be not fun. So I'll help. Maybe look around the 20th, and you'll come to this clause that identifies the conversion rate, which tells you how it'll be determined. So it's determined by dividing the conversion amount of such preferred shares by the conversion price. So what that basically means is that if you took the warrants that convert for shares and you compared it against the conversion price, which we know had to be the greater of the low end, which was the 71 cents, or the VWAP, which was the lowest average. And we know in February that lowest average was $1.49. So then we'll assume in March that the lowest possible price was that 71 cents. And the reason why is because we don't actually know how many of the 5,700 were actually exchanged at which point. So we don't know which prices they actually hit. So by taking the VWAP, which was the higher of the two in February, and taking the lowest possible value for March, we can get an average. And when you take that average and you convert it based on the 5,700 worth of warrants, it identifies that the average price that would have been paid is about $1.10. Now, when you divide all of that by $1.10, you're going to see that roughly it's 51.64, and that's per warrant essentially. So when you multiply that 51.64 by the amount of preferred stock warrants that were held, you're going to end up around 29 million shares. And of course, from there, based on the prospectus price point, the fixed price that had to be purchased, you can now determine how much money was actually accumulated by the person who decided to exchange those common stock warrants to shares.
Gotcha.
They would have made 181 million from that, roughly.
And also, Anasara wants to add just one thing to the 149. Anasara, go ahead, man. You're on the show. Sorry, I'm having to shuffle people in and out. So go ahead, Anasara.
Yeah, no worries. I just wanted to bring up the fact that $1.49 was the price of the McDonald's ice cream cone that Ryan Cohen mentioned in his GME DD interview. So I don't know. I just too many Cohen incidences. You know what I'm saying?
We like our tinfoil here, Whoopass. All right.
No, I just can't. Like, I couldn't. If you asked me to get as high as shit on practically anything and write a book or a story or a movie, I could have never come up with that and linked it all together. Like, just.
Whoopass, can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
So one of the bullish things for me when this HBC play was going on was somebody had to come and pay the debt note that JPM had due on March 1st, like you said earlier. And if I understood correctly, or at least the way I interpreted it, or at least the way Sue Gov at the time kind of expressed it, she almost gave the wording that because of HBC, they were able to pay that debt note. And so if they were acting on behalf of a third party, that for me was extremely bullish, knowing that a third party that was supposed to be nefarious in terms of a death spiral had literally come to the table and provided the 189 million. I don't remember how many preferreds they cashed out. It was like 7,000 or something, but you just did the math there. And to me, that was extremely bullish, because why would a third party that was creating a death spiral come and pay a debt note for JPM? Do you remember that?
Yeah, no, it's perfect. And so just shortly, I think after this slide, we're going to get into all the math.
Sorry, my man.
No, you're good. Hey, everybody's welcome here. The questions are great. But I'll also go even further and show you why HBC can't be a bad party in this play.
Interesting.
You'll see it. You'll see it.
Go ahead, Michael.
I just found something kind of interesting, that one filing you brought up from February. Like when you were scrolling through, I noticed something that said JPM, and I always look if something says JPM, and so as I was going through it, and I looked up Canada, it says that there's the pursuant to Section 427 of the Bank Act of Canada. So I just looked that up. So it was saying that if there's a restructuring of any sort of credit or whatever, it's a triggering event. And so if they're enacting that, it says Section 427 of the Bank Act in Canada deals with the registration of special security interests by banks, which is a mechanism for banks to secure loans against a debtor's property. I don't know if that has to do with like a separate set of shares that possibly still exists in good old Maple land.
It could. There's a lot. So, well, here's an interesting footnote then. This leads right here with the corporate event. Because when you look in that prospectus filing, there is some specific language that says other corporate events, and is very provocative. Like if I'm not sure if this would stand with the terminated deal, but I mean, I presume it depends on what's in the writing and stuff with the exchange agreement, because I do believe, again, I keep saying this, that some of that is redacted with all the stuff in HBC, and I wouldn't be surprised if the exchange agreement is designed to make this beneficial to whoever provided a lot of this money. So I asked ChatGPT to explain that. If you want to look it up in the prospectus filing, so it's amended one, you'll find it if you search just that other corporate events. I think there's only 2 entries of it, and you're looking for the clause B. But essentially, and you'll love this, is, you know what, PP, maybe you should read that part, because I think it'll be just in your wheelhouse there. It's right from the Imagine. It's the 2 paragraphs.
Yes. You want me to start at Imagine?
Yes.
Okay, so it says, imagine you have a special type of magic ticket, preferred shares, that lets you swap it for regular toy tickets, common stock later on. Now, if the toy store is having a big sale or changing how it works, a corporate event, and the regular toy ticket holders get some extra goodies like a bonus toy or cash, your magic ticket also needs to give you the same extra goodies when you swap it. So before the big sale happens, the toy store will make sure that your magic ticket lets you get those extra goodies too, just like the regular tickets. You'll have a choice to either get the extra goodies on top of the regular toys or get the same extras that the regular ticket holders receive. This rule applies to every big sale or change that happens in the future.
So that was the explain it like I'm 5 variant coming from ChatGPT.
I like it.
I figured you would. I tried to make sure we get content here for all age groups.
Of course. Good stuff.
But I also like to put in a little hint here that when I read that, the very clear thing that I'm seeing is the amalgamation of Baby into Teddy.
Yes.
Or whatever the big plan there with Teddy is and how Baby plays a part to it. So,
right. Yeah.
And if honestly, I think when we finally do get to see redacted stuff, if we start to see something particular to an exchange agreement and we start to see that some of these clauses were carried over with it, it's going to be like just the nail in the coffin type of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, let me go ahead
next
and scroll to the next one.
So here's the part. Here's the part that ABC wants, the adding up piece.
Okay.
So when we take a look at all the money that was accumulated, we had the 181 million from the common stock based on the warrants, right? And it came from the preferred stock warrant conversion, but who holds these? We don't have a clue, right? And the best part is you won't see it in any sort of filing, because shortly after all of this would have transpired, the company filed for Chapter 11, which removed its reporting obligations because it moved over to OTC on April 25th. So companies no longer had to report about their holdings. But that's the reason why the bankruptcy court probably set up that freeze for anybody that was, I think, within a 4.5% holdership or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this should get some gears ticking in your head when you're trying to dig into stuff.
Yep.
You also know that they got 135 million from HBC from selling the preferred A series stock warrants. So a lot of people get confused by this. They sold the preferred A series stock warrants to HBC. Those were for the right to convert into preferred stock warrants. Those preferred stock warrants could then be converted into the common stock warrants, which would get common stock. It's basically like a almost like a waterfall. And so they made money off of the initial element of HBC, but then they made subsequent money based off of the conversion price to the common stock. And until any of this got converted to common stock, none of it had voting rights. So because they were all different types of shares with non-voting rights, they all had different CUSIP IDs, which allowed you to identify how much of them were actually out there. You also know that they made about 115 million from the at the money offering with Jefferies. Now, we don't know how much of that was distributed kind of like in a lump sum payment, but we'll get to that. We know from the filings that the ABL was approximately 1.1 billion, where 375 million was initially the filo from 6th Street. And that means that the ABL with JP Morgan as the agent was about roughly, I think, 725. At least that's how the math works out here. I think I've seen it before. It was close to 800 million. If you go through the 10Qs and the 10Ks, you'll be able to find exactly the amount of money at which state and time that was for the filing. But because we're dealing with estimates here, we don't have the full picture of the money. It doesn't really matter. It's about how close you get to this that really starts to paint the picture of how this is possible. And then finally, we see the recent development piece under the March 30 filing, because it tells you that the ABL it was only 565 at the time, but then got decreased to 300. So this is right up to your point, ABC, where you're saying, well, that ABL got paid off somehow through all of this, and they're telling you when they canceled the deal that they only had about 300 million left that they had to pay. So then if we jump to the second part of this.
And real quick, let me just read these back out. We got Loss out there with the 2. I just like the stock. I am an individual investor. Right on, man. Glad to hear it. King Weenie out there with the 2. Sloppy never misses. Always hits. I love you. Right on, man. Big love to Sloppy tonight. Go ahead. Whoopass.
Yeah, no worries. So now you get the math. Let's do that. You take from the 725 million that was roughly the ABL left.
Yes.
And you take off the 135 from HBC, that gives you 590. And we know from the court dockets and filings that there were other additional sales to investors during the warrants period. They amounted to somewhere around 25 to 30 million dollars. I think there was almost 30 individual investors that got involved, or group investors. So the number adds up. And when you take that 25 million off the 590, you get 565 million. Which is crazy that lines up exactly to what Bed Bath & Beyond is telling you. This is where our ABL was at. Then they proceed to show you that it was reduced to 300 million. So we now have to ask, okay, where did the other 265 million come from? Well, we know that the 185 million from the stock warrants happened, right? And then, of course, there's that 115 from Jefferies, and which would give you about just shy of 300 million. So when you take the difference from that 296 million to 265, it's about $84 million that from the 115. It's $84 million of the 115 is what would have been needed to combine with the 181 to get the 265. That's the math. I should have demonstrated, but if people are into it, they'll figure it out. They're smart. Yeah. And why this is important is because the at the money offerings, the way this works is the institution, the underwriter that is acting as the agent or the broker of the deal will hold on to the money and then distribute it to the company less the fee based on the timeline of the deal. Sometimes that's right away. Other times it can be in lump sums once they get accumulated to a certain amount. And it could have also depended on how Jefferies was carrying out that at the money offering. For all we know, all of that 115 million that was being done with their ATM from August 2022 was actually designed to be to private equity. We don't know. It was just a share offering in which Bed Bath & Beyond was collecting money. And we don't know when they explicitly got that money. We only know that they terminated the deal, meaning that they finished doing their collection on it.
Correct. Yeah.
In March 30th of 2023. Okay. So let's dig into the last 300 million. Let's take a look.
Yes. Real quick, we got Kids Meal out there with the 20. Appreciate the love, Kids Meal. Cool show, PP. It would be a lot cooler with a Conker's Arcade behind you. By the way, please let the world know I am not Pete Davidson. I just like video games. Right on. So pertaining to that, I'm sure you guys probably haven't seen it on Twitter, but Kids Meal out there actually got a response from fucking Kevin Gill. looks like to be on maybe Instagram. And he said, I've been asked at least 40 times on X if I know you, since we both have the Terminator arcade one-up machine. He says, that's awesome. So yeah, that Terminator arcade machine, right on, Kids Real. Honestly think it's fucking crazy, man, that you even got a response from him. So well said, dude. All right.
So 300 million to go. Let's figure out where we got it. Now, we know that RC sold his shares in August 22, and it was a private equity deal. Now, that made roughly somewhere in the range of 60 to 70 million profit. But if you include the share price, which it was roughly just shy of 8 million shares at probably an average price of 22, I think he sold, his lowest price point at the time was around 20 or 21, and the highest point that he sold some shares was 29. So I went around conservative estimates at 22. It's about 176 million. So when you combine that with the 60 to 70 million, that would give you a rough total sale of 236 to 246 million. Now, assuming only the profit was what was exchanged eventually, and that would still leave you with 230 to 240 million to pay. But if it was the whole amount that went as the commitment, well, then there's only 50 to 60 million really to be paid owing left on the ABL. Because remember, we're trying to track down where did this money come from and how is it being paid. So we also can't forget that HBC, now based on the court documents, has sold more warrants than they were theoretically claimed permitted to sell. So it's entirely possible that the 29 million shares that we think that they've kind of pushed out there might be more, meaning that there is more value that would have been retained from that deal. And that could be, you know, the last 54 to 240 million, whatever that amount actually is. It's a variable amount.
Right.
But I'm glad you asked, because there's no coincidence, and I'll show you why. Now it's time to reveal the curtain and insert GME into the conversation.
All right.
When you take a look at GME's 10Q of December 2022, they have a line that references that they have marketed securities of exactly $238.3 million. So that means they have securities worth that amount. They've exchanged money for it. Now, what's interesting about this is that, later on that Ryan Cohen put in the language to be explicitly the handler of that with all of the operations for GameStop. And I think that might have been in the March 2023 10K, where they make reference where it's just slightly a bit more. It's not much. So they're doing a little bit of work, but it's just 251 million. But when you do those numbers and how conveniently they line up with what's missing on the ABL, it's kind of interesting that right at the very time that RC is leaving from Bed Bath & Beyond, and GameStop is opening up and owning these marketable securities. And then you get into the new year, and that's when what's the difference left for the ABL that all of a sudden just miraculously disappears. Mm-hmm. And this is why this is really, really interesting, because that's how the ABL basically got paid. What I think collectively happened here is we're not dealing with one player who has all of this as much as we might have thought or would have wanted to see a hostile takeover in that fashion. I think it's a case of there are multiple players. There's a scene in the movie, it's with Gerard Butler, Law-Abiding Citizen. Mm-hmm. And basically he does a segment of having a whole bunch of shell companies and purchasing a whole bunch of different stuff from all these places so that people can't actually determine where is it coming from. And it's a brilliant, brilliant concept. And I think you're seeing very much a similar type of play here where there's just so many people involved. You cannot actually identify who's who. It's been fun to kind of try and dissect. Okay. If nobody's got any questions, we'll jump into the next sections here. We're getting close to wrapping this up.
Does anybody have any questions here for Whoopass up until this point in time, what we've been discussing here? Let's hear it tonight.
Yeah, one quick question at least. Whoopass, with the progression of like when the funds were made available to Bed Bath & Beyond, do you think that HBC totally like exhausted their ability to buy those warrants, and they exhausted they gave all the money into the company, and then B. Riley came in? I'm just curious if it was just like they fully completed that and then B. Riley came in and that was a secondary source of funding, or if they were funding the company concurrently.
So as the underwriter of the deal, they are basically negotiating the agreement and then handling kind of like the oversight of its actions. So when you look at the fact that HBC just kept doing these things, that they probably shouldn't based on the legalities of the terms set out in place, people would point to B. Riley and say, well, wait a minute, you're supposed to be enforcing the oversight of that. So when you think of what then happens subsequently with the March 30th, and we're going to get there, I promise you, when we start digging into the price points that happen between February through April, you're going to be like, whoa, what the fuck? Because I'll get PP, you get ready to load that one up to the actual investor price point, and we'll put in from basically February 1st all the way to April 30th, I think. So,
yeah. And one more, just a quick comment. One thing I've been thinking this whole time, because in these recent GME like quarterly check-ins, whether it's just a shareholders meeting annually or the quarterly reports, GameStop's been pretty consistent in saying that they don't have any acquisitions or any meaningful investments really lined up. Everything is sort of like we're just holding on to cash and some marketable securities. And to me, it seems very much like the fact that there is all of this pending legal work and there's nothing ready to go, that it seems like this could very well be in play because there's just red tape that needs to get cut through. And there is no way to, it's not clear that they will be able to acquire because there's so much red tape, but we're snipping through it consistently. So I'm loving to see this GME connection in the context of, the PP show and Bed Bath & Beyond. This is really cool.
Sorry, go ahead, Whoopass.
I was just going to say, you nailed it. Like the fact when they say marketable securities, that's not an investment. That's not them making an acquisition. That's them going out on the stock market and purchasing something, what they are legally allowed to do. And let me give the example. When they report on their 10Qs and their 10K, they'll tell you how much money they spent on office supplies. They don't tell you which system they bought, which color paper they got. That's details that are insignificant to you. They might to an auditor who comes in and takes a look under the hood, but it's not for the public's necessary to know that. So when they're saying they've got marketed securities here, they're basically just saying we have a vessel of value of money that's currently invested here. And this is what it is. You don't know what it's actually invested into. And I think that's the reason why they started getting poked around like GME from the other types of investors. And then this whole diversity stuff started to come up and everything else. You're starting to see these little coy games happen. And so what happened is then Ryan Cohen basically said, okay, screw this. I'm going to take on the assumption and the ownership of it, and nobody under the company will know. It'll be completely under me. I will direct all of this. And so now there's only one person you go to, and he ain't telling you shit.
Yeah.
I want to add, sorry, ABC, if you want to go, and then I want to add something too. I don't know if you want
I just 100% agree with that entire thesis that RC literally had to take control of it and not disguise, because he was being forthcoming in his, but they were marketable securities. He just didn't have to define what they were and who they were propositioned for and what the final outcome was, because that transaction hasn't been consummated in full. And so therefore he shed the light, but didn't have to define everything. So I think it's absolute, 4D chess, 100%.
And also, I want to add too to Whoopass, that kind of solidifies the fact that even despite them saying in these ATM offerings that look like, and quite literally they did, there's a lot of like contradictory stuff, right? Like at one point they say, we don't really know what we're going to use these funds for. They're not going to be utilized for acquisitions, things like that. And then in another, when you actually look at the actual ATM offerings themselves, they clearly state they're going to be utilized for acquisitions for the company, right? The other really big thing for me, it comes down to Larry Chang, obviously, right? Larry Chang obviously was here on the show back in December when we did the Pulte event, and he's the only board member who's able to buy the security, right? Out of every single board member out there, no other board member has bought in over 10 months. So I do think that you could be onto something here, that this is kind of being placed on the back burner to get wrapped up so that they can continue on with whatever's going on here, whether that be they're undergoing some kind of acquisition or merger as we speak, or a blackout period. Surely these things are all interconnected when Larry Chang is the only board member who's literally been able to buy in the last 10 months. So,
yeah, no arguments.
All right, HBC.
All right. Yeah, so we're finally going to get to this point because so far
the good guy.
Yeah, right.
I'm going on mute. Tell us all.
Okay, all right. So we haven't actually proven, at least yet, that HBC is a good guy. And I will say this, they're dirty. They're dirty in the sense that they're designed to do dirty things. They don't necessarily, they bend the rules at the very least. They might break a few in the way, but that's by design. Okay, because if you take a look at the easy answer here, the ABL, to cover the ABL, it'd have to come from somebody who wanted to prop the company up. Why would somebody who wants to drown the company pay that much money into these warrants, into this deal, for the purpose of trying to pay off the ABL? The reality is they wouldn't, right? So right off the bat, that's just common sense, but I'm somebody that likes to humor the debaters. So here we'll go. We're going to go through and actually demonstrate this mathematically based on the language, why it's not possible. We know based on the highest stock price that were bought with the warrants and that could be sold as a short seller, it was $5.86 in February. That was the highest closing price day. And I think at the highest point in that day, it might have reached $7 or something like that. But basically, there wouldn't have been really an opportunity for them to make a profit off of the fixed conversion price. Because even though the price of the day high was $5.86, they still would have had to pay $6.15 for the conversion of those common stocks. That means that they could have never benefited from a 16B swing profit trade because they would have always paid more for the stock than they would have ever sold it for on the market. That's what that's basically telling you. There was really only one day in the entire month where it hit past that high, and you wouldn't have been able to sell the amount of shares that they theoretically did to qualify for the swing, like the 16B swing trade. But further to this, technically speaking, the only way they could profit if they did that is they purchase those warrants and then they proceed to short the company in oblivion, after which they would then use the warrants to cover. But this is not necessarily a good thing. It doesn't make sense, because in order for that to happen, they would have to short the price below the difference between how much they pay for the common share exchange versus the highest price they would have been able to sell it. So if we use the highest day trade at 586 and we take how much they're paying at 615, that means that in order to calculate that difference, they would have had to short it below 29 cents. How does that math work? I know that's probably confusing. A lot of people are thinking, well, how does that math work? Basically, if they sold something, so the way you have to understand this is they have common stock warrants that allow them the right to get shares. Okay, so that's their security blanket to close out a short position if they need to. But to get those, they have to pay $6.15. On the market, they can buy the shares for $5.86. That was the highest price day end day in the month of February when this deal was happening. They could borrow a share or naked short sell, whatever you want to consider, at 586, and then proceed to short the stock down all the way, and they would have to get to at least 29 cents in order to make the difference of their profit trade from that 615 that they would have been using the warrants to then collect the shares to close out a position on those naked shorts. Okay. Now that doesn't really make sense because that's a really low number, but it also doesn't make sense because when you take a look at the profit element of it, that's not a lot to be making off of something that you're spending millions of dollars on. In fact, it has such a high likelihood of failing, to be quite honest. So the point here is it's just, excuse the French, not fucking worth it for HBC to have purchased those warrants for the simplicity of trying to death spiral and short the company. If they wanted to do that, they just would have done what probably B. Riley did, naked short. And we'll get there. If you want to slide to the next.
Yes. And also, I do want to add something that you mentioned here too. When you're talking about HBC getting their hands dirty, right? Breaking the rules. Where did we hear about breaking the rules from? We saw a Roaring Kitty meme, right? Where he was, remember when it's in School of Rock, when Jack Black is talking to the kids and he says, you just stick it to the man, you need to break the rules, right? So, I mean, I feel like maybe there could be something here. And, some people tend to forget in some of those meme videos as well. I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was OK Bet or maybe it was UCopy. It was someone out there. They saw that there was a scene in Broad City where there's like this blanket. And basically it was like it was like a connection to HBC, like some kind of logo or something like that. So I just want to point that out there that, again, like we've heard these references where, people had to get their hands dirty. People had to break the rules. And if it is in fact someone who's going to break the rules, it would have been probably HBC. They share the same office as Icon as well. So I mean,
But keep in mind, BB, that I don't think Whoopass is inferring that HBC broke the rules in this transaction. It was more their history and their narrative of all their prior transactions, and that's why I believe they were chosen, because the white hats and the good activist investors knew that the mainstream media, even Michael Blurry literally tweeted, death spiral. And so the whole market and the narrative was HB's in there based on their history, based on the agreement that, again, was kind of separated, as Whoopass has shown us, just in terms of tricking the algos not to be able to decipher the entire play at once, that everybody ran with the dilution narrative, yet really they were acting on behalf of a third party. So I wouldn't infer that HBC broke the rules in this transaction. It was more their history that was leveraged to keep the shorts continuing to attack.
Well said. Yeah, no, I agree with you as well. And my apologies, my however the fuck I described it here, but nonetheless, yes, ABC is correct. HBC does have a history of kind of doing this. They come in, look at BBIG. That was one of the major things where they kind of came in and essentially, like, quote unquote, death spiral the company there. So again, I don't know. If you do ask me, I do think that there is enough evidence that HBC most certainly was a proxy on behalf of someone. But I'm sure we'll probably get to that as well. So go ahead, Whoopass.
And here is really the nail in the coffin. Knowing the math that we just executed there, that they would have had to short to 29 cents to be able to generate a decent profit based on the average trading closeout period in February at its highest point, means that they wouldn't have been able to do that because they wouldn't have been able to convert the warrants. The lowest price point that they could ever convert the warrants was 71 cents. So it doesn't logically make sense for them to go and put money up front, buy these warrants for the purpose of trying to death spiral and sell access to all this stuff, if they could never actually exercise that.
And Whoopass, we never hit 29 cents into bankruptcy, where the agreements were canceled at that point anyways.
It hit 29
Great
cents.
Point.
Yeah, it hit 29 cents in basically, I think, April timeframe. It was after the March 30th. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, no, it's perfect. It basically just demonstrates, not when you look at that math, it's just a simple math problem.
Yep.
HBC would not have been able to benefit from shorting it. They could have potentially tried to do on the one day a little bit, but not to the amounts that they were trying to suggest, and certainly not enough to profit off the trade. So it goes to demonstrate that the intent of them in this deal is to really act as what the media told you and what the filings told you. They're a proxy for somebody. Okay, so since we know that they held on to their shares into basically May, when the last time they reported, at least whatever they were planning to keep, and we got the corporate event language earlier, we have to ask, okay, so what happened to the shares? Where were they passed off to? We can jump to the next slide.
Okay.
The reality here is your guess is as good as mine, but when you start to break this down, you'll start to realize that, okay, there's an obligation of 10 plus 5 million shares, so 15, to whoever is holding to that exchange deal. You also have the 29 that were actually, at least at minimum, converted with the common stock warrant exchange. You have roughly about 8 million that came from the private pipe deal with Ryan Cohen, which if were a guessing person, I would say that's the 8 million that probably sits with GameStop. And when you put all that together, you get about 51 million. We know at the time of the HBC deal, there was 117 million. So when you add this stuff up and you realize that by the time the deal was done, they're reporting 430 million. You take 117 off, you take the 52 off. It leaves you with about 260 million shares that are unanswered for at this point. So why this matters is because I think I saw in the chat that King Sex mentioned that there was an additional 6th Street, I think, pumped in an additional 100 million with the ABL. That could have been in exchange for shares. There's or future dated shares. There could be shares sitting in Treasury for this. That's the reason why they expanded the TSO. Like, there could be lots of avenues and lots of players who are collecting money on this that are doing it through, a chain of a chain of a chain. And all we know for certain is that Bed Bath & Beyond did get the money because they cleared up the ABL. So it had to come from somewhere. and we're seeing all the trail of where this money's coming from. We see the players, at least at the front for the proxy level. We just don't know who specifically holds those shares, right? But it doesn't really matter. And I'll show you why, but I think ABC's got a comment, so I'm going to let him.
Go ahead, ABC.
I'm just curious. You got me so excited about your next slide. So let's just go to it. But I'm thinking B. Riley, because that agreement itself was acting on behalf of a third party as well. It was a proxy. And the funny thing about the B. Riley deal is it was also under a family office. And so he could have hidden a lot of the shares that were sold under his part through a 13F filing, where he didn't even have to disclose those ownership in terms of who bought the shares and what. So I'm curious to see what you're about to drop on us, brother.
Go ahead and load up the price historic chart there.
Yes.
TP. Thanks. So for everybody else, whenever you do get access to this slide, there's references to the dates, the timeframes that happen, and we'll go through. So this is a historic price chart. You'll probably want to zoom in a little bit, PP, just so people can see.
Is it kind of small?
Yeah, it's a little bit small.
Just
control mouse wheel if you can.
Yes.
Do it. Yeah. There you go.
That better?
Yeah, that's perfect. That's good. Okay, so we're going to change the dates from you want it to be February 1st of 2023.
Okay.
And then you want it to go to April 30th of 2023. Perfect. Okay, so we'll go down to the very beginning just so people could see this. So February 1st, you could see, and January 31st, you could see where the price is going wonky. And then February 5th, remember, this is the first time in which we start to see this huge price increase. This is where the people behind the scenes learned about the HBC deal. February 6th is when they proceeded to announce, and then they said that starting February 7th, they had issued out all of these stocks and warrants. Take a look at the volume on those particular days. So for anybody that's not following, the very first column there with the red and green, that's the price that the day ended. The prices in between are showing the highs and lows of that day, and then obviously the million column, the M column is referencing the number of shares that were volume wise traded in millions. And you can see, okay, so even with the crazy stuff that happened in January of that year, all of this stuff that transpired with the deal on the 5th and the 6th is where you see that. Now we see a massive influx of probably about 4 times the number of shares that would typically be traded. And then we proceed to see from about February 8th onwards, an average of somewhere between 50 to 100 million shares at most. And that will continue right up until basically, I think it's March 29th.
Yep. We go to, well, first we go from a low, this is probably the lowest amount of volume of the year, basically 12 million, and then we shoot up to 150 plus million the next day.
Which this is, take a look at the price difference between the March 28th and March 29th. What do you notice?
We have a decrease from 80 cents to 59 cents.
And what's key about that 59 cents?
Tell us, Whoopass.
It is below the 71 cent marker for the warrants. It is the first time during the deal. Yeah. It's the first time it hit that price point, which meaning at that point they could not. What day comes after March 29th?
March 30th.
Which is when they released the filing saying that they terminated the deal.
Yeah.
And take a look at what happens immediately at the stock price when that happens. Because they're all of a sudden offering 300 at the market with B. Riley's, and you see the stock just tank, and you see the average volume all of a sudden just skyrocket for some reason. Okay.
So would that be, and I'm questioning, because my thesis, because we saw this insane volume, even to the point where we got up to 979 million shares traded in a day. And my suspicion at that time was, I wonder if B. Riley and Carl or whoever these guys are, being represented by B. Riley as a third party, would be so business savvy to come in and accrue either more shares. But I think you're alluring to the fact that the HBC deal finished. What are your thoughts from the 30th onwards?
What I'm saying here is that I believe, this is my opinion, and it's not necessarily what everybody else necessarily believes, because I think we'll show more evidence in B. Riley in a minute, and you guys can make up your own choices on it. But I believe that they are one of the parties that is nefarious here, and that they are or have been working with people colluding to do a lot of the shorting and everything else. I remember when I looked at the March 30th filing around the 300 offering that there was very explicit language of how that was not meant for short selling, that they couldn't use it for the purpose of taking the shares and short selling themselves. And we see an uptick of volume immediately on the 30th. Like, for all the stuff that was apparently happening with the death spiral and the HBC deal, why did all of a sudden the volume just massively increase when they canceled it and offered a new 300 million shares with the same underwriter? Okay. And then to your point, HBC, of what you were, or ABC, what you were saying, take a little PP, scroll up to April 16th. We kept dropping. Look at the volume prior to this date, and then look at the volume on this date. And then take a look at what happens with the price action for the next 3 days.
So we go from 89 million in volume April 13th with a 24-cent price. And then April 16th, 17th, and 18th, we see 3 straight green days with insane volume, with the 18th being nearly $1 billion in volume. I remember that day as well.
And keep in mind, the buy-sell volume on those days was like 70 to 80% buy versus 20 to 30% sell. And that triggered me that day. It's like, how the hell can you have that much buying volume, yet the price is not being reflected as such? And just the increase in volume. But sorry, Whoopass, I don't mean to interrupt.
No, this is good. You're doing great. I like it. We're tag teaming. There's an important reference of why that intraday finished at 46 cents.
Why is that?
The high was 56 cents. What do you notice when you take a look at all of the trading that happened in the month of April, essentially? The price never goes what? Never goes above something.
It looks like it never goes above 50 cents.
Exactly. 50 cents represents the strike price, the lowest option strike price that was permitted for Bed Bath & Beyond at that time.
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so,
holy shit.
and here, just hear me out. 50-cent strike price means that you, to accumulate 100 shares and force execute a market maker to have to collect them, would only cost you $50.
So, if this be the case, because I know B. Riley right now is having a lot of problems with a lot of other stocks too. And so what you're possibly inferring is that B. Riley was involved in a short position on this and hammered the stock, literally keeping its seller box at 50 cents to profit on that side of it as well. And so maybe Mark Cahodes is right here. I don't know. Wow.
So if you scroll up a little bit, go back to that 900 million. Just I just want it to sink in. It almost got up above that, but market makers, we're talking, this wasn't just the nefarious parties. This is every single bank or institution that had options on the table, shorted the crap out of that stock on that day to ensure that it did not finish above 50 cents.
It's unbelievable, man.
So when all of the RICO fraud and clawbacks and shit come back, and all of you eventually make it and break, depending on how this plays out for whichever stocks you hold, and Moaz eventually comes, I hope you go after these institutions for those option chains that they fucked around on you.
That's what they don't want. That's why you see them throwing like a lot of these like wrenches into the bankruptcy, even holding it up, suing RC and all this stuff, because they know at the end of the day, if a bunch of us end up with a lot of money, we'll be able to go after quite a bit of these people who kind of not only cause the company to go into bankruptcy, but also kind of like, force the stock price down to delist the stock, things like that. You have to remember at one point in time, whether Sue Gov is nefarious or not, she was attempting to do an RS for the company, right? And basically that kind of RS was placed outside their raise. Nobody really knows if they would have been able to make it to that date and time, based off a lot of the shorting that was happening at the time. And again, like, what you kind of bring home the fact that a lot of it is option based does kind of make sense. And I swear the 18th, I want to say was potentially a Friday, but I don't think it was actually. It looks like 420 was Friday.
I'm going to show you. It's actually the Wednesday, and it happens to be exactly 4 business days before they kicked in effect on a business trading day bankruptcy.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. Because the 23rd.
We can go back.
Yes.
We'll go back to the slide,
okay,
and we'll get this conclusion rolling, and then jump right into B. Riley. I think it's like 3 slides, and then
yes,
you guys will be like going on to the next DD.
All right, excellent. Real quick, jealous money out there with a 5. Hey, PP, after Moaz, can we line the kids up to stick suction cup darts to Dougie Seafood's head? Could be hours of fun, and he will need the money. Right on, man. Will be kind of hard when he's in prison. Spin Exiton with the 2. Global economy is cooked, fam. We won. We also got Chains and Sprockets out there with the PP Soft membership. Appreciate your support, Chains. And enjoy those PP emojis. We got Spin out there with the 2. Nah, institutions over leverage as hell. Spin X10 with the 2. Ticker comes back equals financial meltdown. We also got Kids Meal out there with the 5. $5 and Conquers Arcade on me. Love you, bud. Yes, it's on me for giving so much to this community. Love you, bud. End the drama and spread the love. Right on, Kids Meal. Right on. That's very kind of you, man. I'd love a fucking Conquers Bad Fur Day arcade machine. That'd be fucking sick, man. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, so if they canceled, so you're saying the TSO would be significantly lower than that means that they wouldn't need the reverse split. Like, so say they went to do the reverse split and they're like, oh, those shares aren't actually there. Like, we wouldn't be like, what would be a reverse split? What would that even do? Right? Is that?
I think the reverse split was an act by the company to encourage the short selling activity.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it was a psyop. I mean, even when Sue announced it, she had no tentative date lined up.
Mm-hmm.
It was more a ploy to kind of set the narrative of reverse split, then an HBM and or ATM offering. The whole ploy was to give the narrative that, you know, this is, you know, heading towards a death spiral. But the crazy thing is, and this is where I think the RICO really happened, was when you had almost 979 shares trading a day, and if the TSO is only at 428 or 265 or whatever that number is, you literally traded 4 times the outstanding float with a 70% buy compared to a 30% sell, and they were still able to keep the price at 50 cents. That is RICO, man. That is like insane.
I mean, like, I think that if you know, they said that Sue Gov was just totally MIA during, like, you know, when she was in her interview, like, she had no idea what she was talking about. And so, like, she was probably just signing whatever was in front of her that, like, you know, lawyers or whoever was giving her. So it's like, my guess is that they couldn't have done it just for a trap. It's like, oh, try and do the reverse split. Oh, you can't because the shares, like, there's no point in reverse splitting.
It is a playbook 100%, and it is usually an action. So typically speaking, the good side will do the reverse split because they want to try and add value to their share price to increase it so that they can kind of generate more for offerings later. And then the bad people will try and hammer the stock down so you get less value at doing the reverse split. So it's a very expected reaction is essentially what happened when they announced this stuff and then leading into it. And I think, again, the whole point of not having a date is because the keywords, if we're trying to prove fraud, the keyword element of this, triggered by an algorithm, takes an action, and that's what they're trying to combat.
That's right. That's right.
God, I gotta say, man, this is like what a fucking excellent fucking presentation, man, that you prepared for us. I mean, this really like lays it out. And, you know, I don't know how often you tune into the show, but like I say it all the time that there's something here that's missing when it comes to HBC. Like, we don't have the full story. And so many people are so quick to jump the gun and say, no, HBC is nefarious because their background. I mean, people need to remember that this was also not, when we saw the filings come in for this deal, this was a subsidiary that was created under HBC as an LLC, right? A lot of people tend to forget that. When you saw them kind of enter in with BBIG and kind of quote unquote death spiral that company, it was HBC that kind of came in to handle that deal. We did not see a separate entity, a subsidiary filed under them to handle the deal. And I think that part is very important, right? Another thing is Dragonfly, right? we've had people research it and find evidence that there is a dragonfly HBC as well. So I don't know, it's just very interesting. It's very hard to know how many subsidiaries are essentially filed under HBC like this, where they can kind of mask their moves. And again, a lot of the information is redacted, so we don't truly have the real story when it comes to with HBC. Yeah,
ABC always said HBC was good.
You did, yeah. I mean, you're not wrong. I mean,
but
you very well could be correct.
Scholars like this and Jake and Whoopass and everything, but no, ultimately, I wasn't sure about B. Riley, and now what is being presented tonight. It certainly wakes me up. But let's get back onto this because he's got.
Sure.
Hey, one more quick question. Whoopass, what is the implication of that high volume on the 18th staying under 50 cents, preventing the execution of in the money call options at the lowest available strike at the time? Is the implication that if it was, say, at 51 cents, that 4 days later they wouldn't have gone bankrupt, the reverse split may have occurred, it would have proceeded, or just elaborate on that if you don't mind?
Sure. So the reality is I didn't put this in the DD because I intentionally didn't. I want people to kind of go and explore and learn some of these things. But there was a very interesting thing that happened around this time for Bed Bath & Beyond. Does anybody remember specifically what we were counting on the subreddits on a daily basis?
Ring show?
Sure counts.
1-2 punch.
The FTDs.
Oh, yeah.
Failing them constantly for almost 2 months. Like well past the date, and we were just going like, "Wait a minute!"
And those the reg show days of the
Sarah, we're getting some feedback, Sarah.
Oh, sorry, hang on.
There we go.
It's all good.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So when you start checking into that, and you start realizing, okay, they're hitting. Well, if you all of a sudden have the option chain at the lowest possible point, like anybody would have been willing to piss away $50 because to them to buy those, they would have been probably 1 cent calls, especially
they were short. I'm pretty
right?
sure they were. Yeah.
Right. So like it would have cost you what? 50 cents, $5 max, depending on the price point range to buy the call. And then it only would have cost you $50 to exercise it. I mean, I don't make a lot when I'm going behind Wendy's, but I'll blow $50 for that. Why not? That seems like a great idea.
Right.
So they had an insane amount of volume of commitments in which they were not hedging because they're full on expecting this company to just go.
Right.
So it's basically a compliance risk in which they just don't have anything covered for it. And that would have that I think when you see the stuff going on between the 16th, 17th, 18th, there's some underlying things there from both sides that you kind of question and say, I wonder if people were trying to kick that off to start Moaz a little bit sooner.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there is no implication there from this data that you're presenting. You're just saying like, hey, look at this and this happened. There's no implication. It's just an observation.
I just think it's interesting.
Yeah, it's almost like because like the volume is insane, like $1 billion day, and you see the price being pushed up for 3 consecutive days, like straightforward, right?
That doesn't happen normally. There's only 2 reasons that happen. One is illegal, the other is shorts closing, and we know shorts didn't close.
Yep, goddamn right they didn't.
So bring up the slide, and we'll reel this back in, and we'll put ABC's B. Riley situation to bed here. Okay. So shorts are absolutely fucked. If you want to go to the next slide. So when I say that, I mean absolutely fucked. Because just as ABC mentioned, in that February month, they basically fed themselves as cannon fodder. They essentially started shorting the crap out of this company at the worst possible time. You see all of this high trading volume happening. The volume was dead otherwise throughout most of the month. And then all of a sudden that 300 million offer comes and it doubles, it triples. And then you start to see the stock drops to lower points and they terminate the deal. And then they go to fire off even more volume and drop it even faster. And it's like, what's going on here? And every move seems calculated by both sides. let's go to the second part 2, because I think this is the part that everybody's going to be like, okay, whoa.
Okay. Real quick here. We got Salty Lizard with the 2 kids meal. Who do by clown fart noise. We also got Bill Jeet out there with the 5. DFV may have figured this stuff out as well in his video. He makes an allusion to GME making something disappear and make it reappear. And Bill Jeet's correct. You know, a lot of people out there that are like primarily in GameStop or things like that are kind of viewing this. That don't understand the Bed Bath story, they're kind of interpreting it like, oh, he's hiding his options and he's bringing it back. I don't think that's the case at all. I think that DFV really is talking about something completely disappearing, right, and bringing it back. The only thing that I've seen that this could apply to would essentially be our shares, right? Our shares have been quote unquote canceled. They're worthless. They've been recalled, right, by the estate. And, you know, at some point, we're going to get those shares back. Again, there's tons of references to when Michael from The Office pulls up in his car and he says, it's Brittany, bitch. And then the next thing that says is he goes on to say is, I'm back with a new company. There's a lot of references to companies, Teddy, baby, like all of these references play a hand in hand. And again, like, I think that Bill G could be correct that he could have also figured out a lot of this stuff as well. And he probably figured out a lot of it too from watching the goddamn show, when we were running it 5 days a fucking week, man. So I don't know. Emotional damage with the 5. Today's show is one of the best shows ever, except for the fact that we had to look at Wally's stupid face for 3 hours. All right. All right. We got we got some roasting on Wally here, but yeah, Wally's an older man. He's got over 70K shares. Right on. Wally, it's always good to see you.
Just real quick,
ahead, Michael.
I was trying to think what their tactic would be, like as far as shorting it this much, but it would change the definition. It would turn into a penny stock and it'd get pulled out of a lot of ETFs. And so it's like they're like, well, there wouldn't be enough retail to hold it up, and
there's also a very interesting thing that most people don't know about the OTC. The OTC has it's the Wild West of trading, but essentially once you get to that stage, you can set, because it's so, like, you can go to, I think, to like 4 decimal places or 6 decimal places for the price point. You could set obscure price points for your bid and ask and make it, because the system is not going to try and do a best at the market. It's going to look for somebody that matches. And if it has exactly that price, you can have a setup in which you put out a bid for something and somebody puts out the ask in response, and all of a sudden it just disappears. It shows up and disappears immediately. You time that, and you could set up open short at the beginning of the day, end short at end of day, and make it hands washed of what's going on behind the scenes, and nobody would know the wiser. Because we sure as hell know FINRA isn't friggin' keeping proper data on it.
Unless somebody's in the background knowing what exactly the opposition will be doing, and they're simply taking screenshots, collecting all the evidence while they have all the verifiable proof on their end, exactly how this is nefarious and what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And the OTC did just get busted like 3 days ago from the SEC, and like it was like a handful of people came forward and were like, hey, yeah, we're doing this. And then it didn't even list it was like 37 or 27 companies. It didn't even list them all because they're probably getting in a lot of trouble.
Yeah. So just wrapping this all up, like the 16th to the 18th happened. That's that price movement. It almost reached 50 cents, but didn't. And we know why here. We have that speculation with the options chain. And then immediately 4 trading days later, the 19th, the 20th, the 21st, and finally the 24th, that's when BBY turned into BBBYQ. Yep. And that moved it over to OTC, which then removed all reporting obligations. It also opened up the Wild West of the trading. And so like this was, when you look at this, you can't look at this objectively and say that it wasn't intentional on both sides' parts and how they were playing this out. It's a 69D move, chess move, because you don't do these things unless you know that this is how it's going to play out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So next slide there, PP. I think is it might be the provocative one.
Do you want me to read this for some of the people who
No,
okay,
because you're going to release this stuff out and people will have, and I'll make sure that if people will have questions, we'll find a way to help them out.
Excellent.
Okay, so what now? And this is where we get to the ABC's point about the amount of shares being traded essentially.
Mm-hmm.
I think based on this, you can safely assume that HBC was acting with a good party. It's not to say that they explicitly are a good party, but they are acting as a good party based on who they're working with. And you can test this out by building your own assumption table and kind of playing out the different options based on the information you have, and even going further and pulling out things that I didn't talk about or missed. But when you take that information and you just look at the price action and the volume that happened leading into Chapter 11, I mean, that was over 10 times the float in 23 alone. In 2023 alone. I mean, in April alone, the volume was 5 billion. I did an estimate of it. 5 billion. At the 430 million flow TSO size at that point, okay, because remember, they reported that as of March or whatever. That's 11 times in 1 month. That's insane. So what you need to realize is that if they find a way to reinstate Bed Bath & Beyond, whether it's as some new entity and carries over obligations or it's the actual stock itself.
Sorry, I got to let the dogs out. Take over, fellas.
You're going to have this situation where I don't know how they get out of their short positions, especially the people who have really dug themselves into this.
Unless there is a shitload of third-party releases and a major settlement and substantial money put towards the estate to undo, or you can't really undo the damage done, but in theory, if there's enough evidence, which there certainly is, because the people that were on the one side, the good side, so to speak, not saying it was a bear trap to literally prove fraud, but that's obviously the end result here. These third-party releases are certainly going to pay forth the damage done, and we may see a certain individual, RC and affiliates, get this company for free in a sense.
Yeah, that or set it up so that there's a conglomerate of people similar to like Berkshire Hathaway today. You just a whole bunch of the next group of people who own basically everything.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I don't think the shorts are like the people who actually shorted this. I don't think they're getting out of it because the stock ticker was preserved. And I think every single one of those people and all of their associates, all the links that they have, their incredible network of corruption and fuckery is going to be pulled inside out along with it. So even if maybe some of those people who might be involved in this bankruptcy are being given a release, they're gonna get fucked from another angle. That's what I think personally, and I don't think they realize it. I think that's why they went through with this, or maybe they had to no matter what. So I don't know, but that's what I think.
I used an analogy. I forget who I brought it up with, but what you're essentially working with is all the shorts are currently in an open mass of water, and they're kind of drowning. They're all trying to prop each other, and what they're doing is they're pushing on each other's heads to basically prop themselves up to gas for air, and nobody's drowned yet. Everybody's just fighting to kind of stay up. But eventually somebody's going to get tired or they're going to drown. And then what's going to happen is there's going to be less and less people around to push off of to prop your head above the water. And eventually you're going to get tired yourself from trying to tread that water. And what we're going to slowly but surely see is that more and more of these shorts in this position are going to start drowning to a point where unless somebody on a boat somewhere or off to the side decides to throw out a life preservation device, they're all going to go under. And the question now becomes, does the government let them do that?
And if you have multiple tickers that have been put in situations like this that are now all starting to catch fire, how do they have the ammunition to deal? Because what they would do before is they'd hedge one to satisfy the other obligation. And when you have multiple fires going all at once, you run very fast out of ammunition because you've tied up all your contracts and swaps and derivatives. And so if you have a fire going with this ticker and this ticker and this ticker and BBBY emerges with such a large short interest, then it's chaos. So it will be almost a controlled demolition.
Mm-hmm. And let the current situation happening in the market with the Japanese yen and the swing trade there technically be a cautionary tale to what would potentially happen to the U.S. market. Right now, since the decoupling of the fiat currency from the gold-backed standard in the 70s, essentially the U.S. economy and its dollars is driven on the fact that it just creates more debt. constantly creates more debt. And we have a living proof example of what type of pickle you get into if you allow a situation where your debt just continues to climb and you don't actually address that as a responsible entity in what's happening in Japan. So when we take a look at this situation of bailouts, that's basically the government saying, I'm going to contribute more to the debt by taking all these people with their money and saying, okay, well, we're going to bail you out. I don't think the U.S. government has that option. They're going to be selective on who they bail out, and a lot of people are going to go under. That's what I think is going to happen.
And just to add to that, you're now seeing countries who they offshored a lot of these risks and derivatives to, kind of as a placeholder, so that they couldn't be, regulated by FINRA and all these regulators here in the United States. Now you're seeing countries stand up and saying, we don't want to be a part of this anymore. Naked short selling is illegal. And so it's a global epidemic. And you're right. I don't think the government's going to come along and just bail everybody out. I think they're going to be very selective in who they kind of keep resuscitated and above water in this situation. And long story short, naked short selling and this type of, and RC literally sent his disposition just a couple days ago. He doesn't like naked short. It's un-American. It's certainly not for the benefit of the country.
I agree with him there 100%. I say, to me, it goes against the principle of investing. When you invest in something, regardless of whatever you do in life, it's about taking a sacrifice of your time and your sweat equity or your money and putting it into something that you want to see future value term out of. The fact that people are betting against the demise of something, well, that's exactly what it is. It's a bet. It's a gamble. And it's not investing, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's destroying the economy that you're a part of, which is contradictory in itself.
It's like being a sports fan, going to a sports game and actively wanting to root for both teams to lose.
Yeah.
Seems like a dumb idea.
Dude, cheaters don't have brains. Like, there are people, even in like stupid little kids games, who cheat and then they get caught and then they're upset that they get caught, as if like somehow like they're not being treated fairly. Like, you won't believe just how stupid and like entitled some people can get. And I have a feeling that's exactly who these naked shorters are, fucking like who they actually are. And it is literally the most fucking pathetic shit I've ever seen in my entire fucking life, honestly.
My apologies. The dogs took forever to shit, but here I am back on the screen, man. So
hey, well, I mean, you gotta do what you gotta do, man.
All right. Would you like me to scroll down here?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes, let's clear out this B. Riley stuff, because I think this is the part that's going to make everybody go, whoa.
Perfect. Real quick, Jealous out there with the 5. PP, the guy who Shazammed the goddamn copyright cat on GME website, and the intro to The Wire came up. I keeps one in the chamber in case you pondering. All right, right on, Jealous Bunny. Appreciate the 5. Bill G out there with the 2. Whoopass, just tell me how much I'm getting paid. Bill G with the 5. Whoopass looks like a friendly and nice Gurknit / Piffy, whatever the hell that means. We also got Corporate Waldo out there with the 2. PP, please pass this $2 to Whoopass. Thanks. And we also got Bill G out there with the 2. My secretary goes down under. All right, let's go back to this here. My apologies, and we'll go down to B. Riley. Yeah.
Okay, so this is the part where everybody will get a chance to go and do something really, really fun. You'll get a chance to go take a look at every single activity that B. Riley has been involved with, because they're very open about what they do. They're a pretty big company. When you go to this link that's on here, and PP, you don't need to worry about it because I've already screen captured everything for the slides as a cheat sheet for everybody. So for the purpose of the presentation here, we'll just quickly run through it. But I wanted to make sure that anybody who goes and reads this later, that you can go and individually look at this, and you might see other things that tickle your brain based on stuff that you've been working on. Essentially, you're going to go back around 2019 and look for Cerberus, because remember, they came up at the very beginning as a potential buyer of Baby before Ryan Cohen's cooperative agreement kicked in. Okay, go ahead and slide to the next slide.
Okay. So I'm actually going to just quickly load up my own so I can read it easier, so you don't have to worry about my friend's. Hang on. Okay. On the far left, so this reads basically like typical writing, top left all the way across, and then second row from the left across.
The very first line item shows you that there's an exclusive financial advisor with B. Riley. So this is all B. Riley with Cerberus, along with 2 other entities. The following April, you see their first engagement with Bed Bath & Beyond, where they basically conduct the sell-side advisor. They were advisor to Bed Bath & Beyond for selling One King Lane, okay? Notice April 2020. That's basically right around the time frame that the pandemic kicked in. This is when all of a sudden a lot of companies started to go, like they started to realize the demise of what was coming.
Right.
September 2020, they enter into a $2 billion closed-end fund co-managed IPO set up with BlackRock, and we all love BlackRock.
Mm-hmm.
October 2020, again with Bed Bath & Beyond as a sell-side advisor, they proceed to I can't even read the text. It's one of the entities.
You want me to zoom in a little bit here?
It doesn't matter. The point is it's something that they gave to Line Equities. They basically sold it to Line Equities. The next one is November 2020, so just a month later, Christmas Tree Shops. That gets sold. There was a squeeze that happened in November of 2020, I think. And again, sell-side advisor. So you've now seen 3 assets internally to Bed Bath & Beyond in the span of like 6 months be offloaded by B. Riley's as the sell-side advisor for this. And it's worth noting that in June of 2020, so roughly after the first sale of asset there, Bed Bath & Beyond signed that ABL with JP Morgan. Then you see, I cannot believe how many offerings AMC did. They have insane amounts of money of offerings that they did. B. Riley's is just a joint agent, or in some cases, like the full-on lead offering agent. Right. And so they did it in November 2020, December of 2020. Then again in January 2021, there was the World Markets that was a sell-off to Kingswood Capital. That was by B. Riley from Bed Bath. And then interestingly enough, B. Riley's became a financial advisor to Bed Bath Beyond in January 2021. I'm not a genius, but I remember January 2021 being a pretty interesting year for anybody that keeps up with news. Then,
very funny, very funny.
You get AOC again. That's his 3 straight months. They just hammered that out, and this is all happening around that same time frame as GME. And so, one of the things that happens with a lot of the old school GME holders is that they believe truly and fundamentally that GME is the idiosyncratic risk, and they're right. Okay, if I were to describe this, GameStop holders are the army. They are the people on the battlefield.
For the wall.
Right. Bed Bath & Beyond is the nuke, and whoever got the nuke was going to win the war.
Great analogy. Yeah.
That's what you kind of have to do. And then what you're seeing here with AMC is that's a supply run for the bad side. All of these offerings is meant to create liquidity into the hands of the shorts because they're playing off of the basket. These are all stocks in the same basket. Okay.
Love that nuke analogy.
Yeah.
Exactly why I got in was just like, this is going to happen first.
So then you have another closed-end co-managed fund with a growth trust this time instead of an allocation trust with BlackRock. And then you get more at-the-money offerings from AMC. And then this is a really interesting one. October 2021, there was another Bed Bath & Beyond squeeze at this point in time. And Cerberus, as B. Riley, an exclusive financial advisor to Cerberus, handling Brooklyn betting. Why is that important? Because Cerberus is the one who is a link to, at least in rumors, to the potential purchase of Bye Bye Baby in March of 2022.
The one that was canceled, right?
The one that was canceled.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, here's another interesting thing. When you take a look at all of these particular players of B. Riley on their website, you will not see any activity for any of them in the year of 2022. So what the hell changed in 2022?
Real quick question. What happened between that time in 2022, between then and October 2021? What did they do after this? Because that's like, that's still
you'd have to go.
Did they do anything?
Yeah. Typically speaking, the shortest time frame to conduct a merge and acquisition is about 6 months. More often than not, they do a lot more. So if you're going to do an asset sale and purchase, it's usually going to take about 6 months to do it. And I mean, so October, November, December, January, February, March, that's 6 months. So I don't know, just seems like that's them setting up. Mm-hmm. And if you realize that they've been in this situation with B. Riley since the very beginning, and B. Riley was previously involved in 4 other asset sell-offs of Bed Bath & Beyond within the previous year, like it all lines up to what's going on here.
Yeah,
and it's just demonstrating the fraud. And
B. Riley is also tanking recently as well. I mean, we're talking 50% down as of this week, right?
So let's slide to the next slide, because
perfect
2022 happens and they don't touch any of these. They still do a lot of work, but they don't touch any of these. And then we get this slide. Here, your next one. There you go. So look who's back. All of a sudden in 2023, they have the Bed Bath & Beyond HBC deal worth $1 billion, 1.025 billion. Then you have them doing the 360 million offering. That was March 30th. Proceeds to later that year, because Bed Bath & Beyond then goes into the bankruptcy state, and B. Riley's just kind of, it's out of their hands, can't do anything. They're doing 2 more at the money offerings for AMC. And then conveniently, when they've never done anything with 6th Street before, specialty lending, they now have a co-managed situation with their 2029 notes. And I mean, first off, at this point, B. Riley and AMC are just, like they're fuck buddies, right? They're just exchanging shares and money, like at free will. Like, I don't understand how they could even have the amount of shares to do that with how much they just keep selling. But it's also interesting that after like a decade or so of not doing anything with 6th Street, they now all of a sudden do something. And there happened to be a pretty explicit case for, in one of the court filings, at least one of the lawsuits that's holding everything up, to suggest that part of the justification of why the plaintiff had a reason to charge the defendant is because they had an invested stake in a company that was tied to the asset, even though the shares were canceled. Like, that was the refuted claim. Mm-hmm. And it seems really interesting that you have B. Riley that all of a sudden has an invested interest. Okay, just throwing it out there again. I don't know.
No, I think something's going on here, man. Something is fucky going on here for sure.
Wasn't there a 6th Street one before 2024 though? Because I remember being confused by that, because when I was trying to first back in the day figure out whether B. Riley was good or not, like I feel like there was a 2022 or 2023 6th Street one. I mean, I can look it up, but
the problem that they have with their site is because they use pictures. It's hard to search. You don't get that like free will to do it. So you'll have to go digging. It is possible. I did not catch it. And if they did it before 2019, then that's the reason why it's not on this, because I only went back 5 years for the purpose of this exercise.
So real quick, let me just read these back here. Mm-hmm. My apologies, because there are a couple here. Bill Jeet here with the 5. Whoopass gives the PP show much needed structure with PowerPoints. Mofo is giving us a PhD dissertation. All right on, man. Yeah. We got Bill Jeet out there with a 2. Should Pete the pilot get a Poutel home? Yeah, why not? Give him one, man. Crayon Green out there with a 10. I'm drunk. What did I miss? Man, you missed a whole lot tonight. This is probably a legendary show, in my opinion. Only person we're missing out there tonight is obviously Jake 2B, who I think would add wonderful stuff to the discussion. But this weekend, I'm going to make sure this PowerPoint lands in his lap. I think he may have checked out and gone to bed for the rest of the night. And I got to say, man, what an excellent show. Loss out there with the 2. Cheers, everybody, with a beer glass. Right on, dude. And we got Crayon Green out there with the 5 PP show gift to members. Appreciate your support, fellas. Again, if you got a membership, be sure to give it thanks in the chat. I got to say, I'm loving tonight's episode tonight. Go ahead. I think it was Anastera, I believe, real quick.
So, I mean, I don't know if there's still more to this, but obviously we don't know the full story, but it reads to me like B. Riley was definitely on the side of the nefarious people doing this stuff. And then somebody came in 2022 and basically caught them red-handed, but then is now utilizing them as sort of a double agent in this situation, where now they're going back to doing these supposedly nefarious things, very similar to the way they did before, but maybe, that's just a deception tactic at this point. Because, I mean, I don't know. Am I reading that right? That's sort of how it comes across to me. What do you think, Whoopass?
It could be. I mean, the only thing I can guarantee about all the nefarious parties is that they're sharks and that they will eat each other up in order to save their own hide type of situation.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's entirely possible that all of a sudden B. Riley decides to be cooperative and share and do things. But it's also possible that they're still they got nothing better to do except the thing that they've only ever done. I think I'll close out by sharing the key facts that I think people sometimes overlook. B. Riley was part of the 7 outlined unsecured creditor committee that was with Mr. Glenn. If you were lucky enough or had the time to catch the hearings that happened last summer, where there was a fight between this unsecured creditor committee, which we need to be very explicitly clear is a separate entity to the actual unsecured credit committee that had a trustee involved with them. They had an issue with 6th Street being the dip lender and getting the super priority over everything. Everybody else, all other unsecured creditors, were like, hey, no, we're good. And the only reason why they would be like, hey, no, we're good is because they know that they're going to be resolved of any issues at some point and getting some form of cash back, probably in full. Because you don't just say, hey, I'm good with something unless you're like, hey, no, that looks pretty good to me. So the fact that they're part of that group and that they very clearly didn't want that to happen, it just makes it interesting with the whole 6th Street piece here and then what's going on. Mm-hmm. But beyond this, because they're holding those bonds, I think this is another important thing to touch base on the market. And this is another exercise to go research if you want to dig into it. Bonds trade similar to units like ETFs. So they can be sold naked short, just like a stock. And there is questions around the bonds circulating with Bed Bath & Beyond right now being naked in some circumstances because they can be leveraged or used as leverage in the bankruptcy process to say, well, no, I have a right here. Here's my bond. Mm-hmm. Right. And hold up a process. Now,
sorry, I'll let you finish your sentence here.
I was going to say, outside of that, the last point is that the BYN Mellon Bank, which is the trust for the bonds, the one that's holding all of it, they got hit as part of the massive list of banks that are being investigated with the SEC today with record keeping charges and fraud. So when you add all of that up together, I don't know.
Yeah,
just
40 million penalty, I think is what it was. BNY.
Also, you're right.
Yeah, the whole a lot of them
got.
Hold on, Michael first and Anastera, or Michael.
I just double checked. There's not I guess I had looked at it in January or something, and so I was confused why the 6th Street was there, but it makes sense now.
Go ahead, ABC.
Yeah, I was just in reference to Whoopass in the Unsecured Creditor Committee, when Mr. Glenn presented himself, he was representing about 14% of the bondholders, if I stand correct. And they were the ones that were kind of challenging the DIP proceedings simply because if they could undo such. Now, why they showed up so late and why they didn't take action right at the beginning, I have no idea, but that's to their own blame and outcome. But the UCC committee, as you said, that had the U.S. trustee, they literally agreed to only up to 2.5% payout. Mm-hmm. So imagine receiving only $2.50, up to $2.50 on every 100 owed to you. And yet you have this nefarious party, I guess. And that's where I go back to the original bond offerings that you mentioned earlier in the presentation, that they came out with this new bond indenture in October. And I think that was purposely done to try and shake some of those nefarious bondholders that you were saying. Because if you could get them to move, if you could get the good people to move from the 2024 bonds into the new bond indenture and make them convertible, then what would happen is it would set you up later down the road when you're doing this UCC committee agreement. You could literally say, hey, you're only going to receive this, but if there is a reissuance of equity, you could be privileged to convert to such. And so I just find that it's almost like they knew exactly how this was going to unfold every step of the way, and we're always 2-3 steps ahead. And I think Bill Pulte said it best the other day on a tweet. Ryan Cohen is literally 2 years ahead of everybody, just in terms of how the game how the opposition would react, and then the outcome and how to circumvent it along the way. So it's brilliant stuff.
To put that in perspective, we are only now being able to figure all this out, and it's 2 years after it happened.
Yeah.
Think about
Well,
that.
in our defense,
That's a good
they
point.
had all the private information, and we had nothing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't. I mean, obviously, I mean, I'm not going to downplay his achievements because fuck, man, like I don't know how the fuck he figured all this shit out, but I sure am glad he did because we're going to benefit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And but the only question that I had, what was I? Oh yeah, I wanted to point out that that list of all those banks. There was a bunch of banks and financial companies that they all got hit with like anywhere between like 20 to like 70 million. I just saw 50 million over and over and over again. When people, I think it was Kevin Malone that listed that, and I thought that was really strange that they all got hit with like a very similar fine, like right around the same time. So I mean, I don't know, very peculiar. So
I think it also mentioned there's a slap on the wrist type of thing because it's basically the cost of $1 per trade.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh yeah, that was what I was
peanuts.
thinking too. It's like, okay, 50 million.
What I don't understand, if you're going to fine people that, why isn't that money getting put back into the shareholders that got screwed over? Why is it going to the SEC? Give it back to the people who got screwed by the companies that are doing the fraud.
That's because a lot of these guys, they're all in on it, right? Like a lot of these guys, like they're lining each other's pockets, you know, like, and again, like, you know, we have a history of seeing this where like the SEC tends to turn a blind eye and then all of a sudden, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of damage is already done. And they slap them with, you know, a small, you know, quote unquote speeding ticket, as I think what Pulte has referenced before, which is true. You know, it kind of is like that. And honestly, you know, I think that's really the biggest problem is that a lot of these, you know, a lot of these people are kind of in cahoots with each other when it comes to
I think it's changing though, PP. I think we're at that tipping point that I so often say is that now I believe that back actually in 2021, Ryan went to the SEC and he says, you know what? I'm going to show you. I'm going to bring you the evidence, and I'm going to make it so solid and so forthcoming that you have no option except to act. And I believe that, like you said in that analogy, Bed Bath & Beyond was literally the nuke, whereas GameStop was obviously the wall, the entire, you know, GameStop is the center of the universe in terms of the basket, because that's really the one that they kind of hedged all the other AMC and everything to kind of keep GameStop where it was. And so I do believe we're at that tipping point now, because you're starting to see Andrew Lefty charged. You're starting to see all these charges come out. Actually, May 31st, the document dropped for about 30 minutes, and then it was redacted or pulled from Kroll. And it was an investigation where the SEC was having a closed-door meeting with Bed Bath & Beyond for 2 criminal investigations. And I remember seeing that document drop. I got excited as heck. And then when I went to go and kind of get a bookmark or a receipt of it, was literally gone. And so I'm almost going to say that this entire play was not only for RC, who wanted Bye Bye Baby as a business, for a business model to build an Amazon competitor, but by all means too, this was certainly a sting operation.
Yeah, and I just to add a little bit more into that, I think what RC and many other players involved here were demonstrating is that it's not just these elitists up at the top that want to make a difference because they're tired of the shit that's going on. They're demonstrating retail. They're demonstrating that we have become more sophisticated, that we're becoming more involved, that we have an active interest in this, and that we're committed, not just to hold a position and to put our money and take those risks, but to also get involved with doing the work and learning and growing off of that. Like, just to show you all have shocked them with the fact that you are so intensely following a bankruptcy docket and hearings. There was over 1,500 people watching a stream at one point on Twitch. That's insane for a court hearing, which many of you probably have no experience or no clue of what's going on, but you were all into it. And I'll be honest, they loved it. The only thing that they didn't want, and I think I forget who was on earlier this week that mentioned it. He was doing the court writings.
Spurious.
Spurious, thank you. So, and he's right. The only thing that they want is that they want you to register it because they need to be able to stop when there's a situation of needing to redact information or take things back down. So as long as they can say, okay, you can't distribute that whatever. That's the only part they care about. But they were happy to share that with you because it shows that you have an invested interest. And it also forces the judge and all of the lawyers and all the parties involved to be more invested, to look under every rock and take this seriously, because clearly it is something that matters to more people. But beyond that, everybody makes this assumption that RC got Mark Triton removed from Bed Bath & Beyond. That's not true. His cooperation agreement didn't allow him legally to remove anybody from the board. And if he was found influencing for that purpose, he would have been axed. That agreement would have been nullified. Who got Mark Triton off the board? All of us voters.
Shareholders, yeah.
Yes, because guess what? When they released the annual shareholder votings, they didn't put it up for Mark Triton, and he resigned. He left the company a month before. It was just hush hush under the door. Nobody knew anything. And if they're probably makes sense if they're looking into RICO and fraud and all that other stuff right now, because they probably just figured that all out and said, okay, very clearly everybody agrees.
Yeah.
He also was sued like specifically, I think twice.
Wild.
If you look at the open in their filings, their open litigations, there was like there's 3 different lawsuits. I can't remember what the third one was, but 2 were directly like Mark Triton has done share buybacks and destroyed value, so he was costing the company a lot of money, even just in litigation.
That's it, PP. That's all the DD I got for you today. That's
dude, it was fucking incredible, man. I mean, I gotta say, man, like, holy fucking shit, dude. Let me fix these screens here. Again, I mean, kind of how you lay it out for a lot of people out there, whether it be, people who have really been following this as close as you, or people who are just kind of trying to understand just the base of what happened here. You really paint a clear picture of how, everyone kind of played a role here, right? When it comes to 6th Street, when it comes to JPM and the ABL, B. Riley's kind of underwriting these deals. And to be honest with you, I wasn't really even aware that B. Riley had a hand in a lot of those AMC offerings as well, which really paints a large picture here, right? With the dilution and things like that and these offerings. I don't know. I'm very much convinced that we could see something transpire when it comes to 6th Street and also HBC. Now, before we let you go, I do just have a couple questions, and I'm sure some of the other fellas here do as well. Where do you kind of sit with the thesis behind potentially Carl Icahn also playing a hand here, right? I mean, there's a lot of mention of RC throughout your presentation. I don't ever see anything mention of Icahn. Do you believe that Icahn could in fact be involved in this, or do you think that it's just an RC and maybe affiliates type of play here? I'm just curious.
I think he definitely is to some extent, because when you start to think of all of the connections and the players involved here, like Holly Etlin, she is him. Carolyn Flatten.
Yep.
She was also him. I'm pretty sure even David Kasten was something in connection to previous arrangement with ICANN through other business dealings. When you start digging up some of the dirt with things like Cerberus and not being like on good terms with, I think in previous situations with ICANN, like there's a lot of dirty dirt down. And what I've always been told from the connections that I have is that they're kind of like a frenemy engagement. They're not necessarily on where friends or allies terms, but in this particular situation and what they're trying to accomplish, something that they'll never forget, it seems like they're objectively trying to go for the same goal. So I think for all of us, we would be equally ecstatic if it's ICANN or RC or both. At this point, I think for those who see it coming and know what's happening, they all want to be a part of it. And the interesting thing that most people, like if you've watched GameStop, for example, over the past 2 weeks and how it's just trading flat, they're intentionally suppressing that stuff so that people can get the big institutions and the big players can start to swing from being a short position to moving into long position so they can start to ride some of this wave as it starts to go out.
Yes.
And that's basically what they're doing.
And I do want to add the fact, when we kind of analyze when the company Bed Bath & Beyond went to OTC, we saw IEP stock absolutely plummet, right? And that's been really like the biggest question of why his stock over in the last year or longer hasn't really, changed or kind of transpired here, or, his stock price just continues to be hit down, things like that. I do personally believe that there is a scenario here where he could potentially be involved. One thing I did want to ask, someone in the chat here, C. Gilligan, wanted to know, and then we'll bring in Controlled here. We also have a Ryan Cohen backstage who says, "You guys won." All right on. C. Gilligan here in the chat, he says, "PP, you should ask him his thoughts on the Caston Cheers pick in July," which is actually a really good post. Remember when we actually had someone had gotten added on Caston's Instagram, and they were celebrating around this time. I mean, why would David Caston be celebrating? And potentially maybe with Holly Etlin, I think at the time was what some people had concluded based off like the hand DD and stuff like that. Where do you kind of stand with that? Like, why would these guys be celebrating, in your opinion, when it comes to David Caston around this time?
There's multiple layers. So there's the layers that everybody wants to hear. And that's the fact that, you know, they have contributed to what ultimately will be the positive outcome that we have.
Yes.
When people ask me, you know, how do I feel about the situation? I won't say that we won necessarily, because winning is an objectively personal thing depending on the person. One person might want $50 per share, another person might want 5,000, and if they're only giving you 100, well, only one of you will feel like you've won, when technically all we can really say is that I believe we're getting paid, and that will probably be in the benefit of most of us, if not all of us. But I can't sit here from my chair and say that we've won, because that's up to you individually to determine what you were setting out to do.
Of course.
But based on that, I do think they look at this as a win, because for them, what they've accomplished, what they've managed to do, what they were trying to prove, and what they've been doing all behind the scenes, whether it's working with the authorities, whether it's just the level of intricacy of every filing that they did. Before Holly Etlin got into the scene, it was David Caston doing a lot of that work and signing off on some of this stuff. So like, they all played a part of it. And I think when you start to see the symbolism between some of the, whether it's RC tweets or it's Roaring Kitty memes and post reference, or you start seeing the conversations that come up into Larry Chen's type of philosophical views, or Bill Pulte's philosophical views, they all connect. And I think at the end of the day, you had a bunch of people, at least based on the small majority that were working together, that got along, that were working towards trying to improve a situation and the betterment of every, because you got to remember, it's not just shareholders. They had a whole bunch of employees and staff, people that they knew that were getting axed and screwed. And they probably had employee share programs and vested registers, and they're having to deal with lawsuits. And like, it wasn't an easy task for them to go through some of these things. So I think everybody has a role and a part to play here. And I do believe that while we're in a position to benefit pretty well from what's going to happen in the near future, I think it's also a case of that they were celebrating the wins that they accomplished professionally as well as this story.
Right on. Excellent. As long as we end up stupid ass fucking rich, man, it'll all be fucking worth it, man. Fellas, you have some questions here for Whoopass. Take a shot. Well, it's a very rare occasion that we ever get Whoopass here at the show. Again, the last time he was on it, the VP show wasn't even a thing yet, man. So please take the time to ask him questions while he's here with us tonight. Anybody want to ask him anything? Go ahead.
Yeah, I got a question. Why now? Why not any time before? You're absolutely a fucking legend, and you come now at the moment of victory. Where have you been?
Yes. Well, so truth be told, I started a vacation 2 days ago. So that's the only reason why the DD got produced. The time was available to do it.
Well, thank you for coming on your vacation. That's very nice of you. I do appreciate it.
I loved it. Honestly, I catch it every now and then. I like to provide information that I can, having seen what's transpired with this, and also open up my mind, because I think I come from a very unique stature here, in which I was not a GME holder when I was a Bed Bath & Beyond holder. I got into Bed Bath & Beyond first because I was looking into a lot of the mechanics of that. But as I started to learn about the people involved, and as I started to learn more about the leadership that is behind a lot of what's going on here, I started to say, you know what? That's not only somebody that I would put my money behind and back, that's somebody I would go and work for. And that says a lot about a person, that you would actually go out and do that. So that's when I started to say, okay, you know what? I believe in what GameStop's trying to do. And I think for anybody that, especially if they get a little upset that, you know, we're talking a little bit too much BB today and not enough GME or AMC, or GME still is truly the only stock on the market that we could definitively say is owned by retail, by the market,
correct,
not institutions.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important truth to what will eventually play out in the near future.
Well said. Let's go ahead and take it over real quick to Control. What do you have for Whoopass here tonight?
No, I mean, he did an amazing job. I wanted to say thank you, but I didn't really have anything specific for him. I was coming on to talk about other things, so I didn't want to tie him up if he's trying to get out of here.
Oh, okay. No worries. We'll put you backstage here. Real quick, Michael, Wally Buck, ABC. Any questions for Whoopass before we let it go?
I'll just quickly jump in. It was good to see you, Whoopass. Like I said, you were kind of one of the first people that I started reading on Reddit way back when. Had never been in the stock market before, but your posts piqued my curiosity. I met a PP at that point in time. I just want to say appreciation for you, because a lot of the OGs get burned out. We've seen a lot come and go over the couple past years, and yet here you are, 2 years later, still pounding out the DD, hopping onto a PP show like that. So my appreciation to you, and good presentation tonight. And I just really appreciate it.
Well said. All right. Whoopass, or Michael, if there's anything you want to add.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, just same. Also, just put in the hard work, and it's just like the amount of professionalism. No drama, just, getting the job done. You're sending me and several other people on a rabbit hole to for the Cerberus and find all the connections, because I was talking to several people. I was trying to tie Mark Triton to the buybacks and the conflict of interest through more so than JP Morgan, actually Goldman Sachs. And so Cerberus actually might be the key, because it looks like a lot of the board members are from Goldman Sachs, and we'll see.
Cool. All right. Go ahead, Wally Buck, and then we'll let Whoopass go. You're muted.
Thank you very much. Without getting tied to like a date, because some people have certain ways that we feel about hype dates, but in terms of like a progression of likely series of events, considering everything you put into the presentation you gave us tonight, what's coming? What's next? I'd love to. Feel free to speculate. Obviously, nobody knows, but what's in your mind?
So, what I was told and taught from my opportunity of learning some very intelligent people that do this stuff at a very high level all the time is that lawsuits will start to pile up before any sort of merger and acquisition type of activity takes place, or transition, and they'll take it on. They'll do all kinds of stupidness. Like if you go back to the early days of, I think the first lawsuit that kicked out might have been just at the November 2022 against Ryan Cohen. That's probably the first one that started kicking out around this. And the person that filed it didn't have a proper license in place with their lawyer stuff. They spelled names right. Like they were doing intentional mistakes to just drag out how this stuff was playing out. And then eventually they decided to acquit some people from the, just not pursuing. And like JP Morgan was one of the defendants, and they got removed. And you start to see this more and more with a lot of the different lawsuits that we're still seeing today. So based on that principle, the holdup for anything transpiring was always going to be the amount of legalities going on here behind the scenes that either prevent the ability to do discovery, impact the ability to handle the handoff or gifting, or even restitution, depending on the circumstance, to the various parties in the waterfall. So like if you're trying to sort something out that adjusts the priority, or who explicitly has control, like you need to get rid of those lawsuits before you can proceed to carry out those actions, or you jeopardize the actual reward of the situation of conducting it. So before any of those activities, everything's drawn out. It takes a long time. And that's why it's hard to pick out a date, because you're waiting on courts to decide. And hearsay in a lot of cases until you got definitive proof and you can dismiss things. And given it's a bankruptcy case, the judge, and my hats out to Judge Papalia. I mean, I might personally send him a written letter and some flowers when this is done. I'll go to my way to find out how to do it, because that man deserves a handshake for being not only an excellent representation of the judicial system for this, but also being patient and trying to hear both sides of the situation, whether you're good or bad on it. He is doing his job the way you expect him to do it. Really puts faith in the system that to date has not really given us much.
Right.
So after the transaction happens, those lawsuits are going to close up real fast, because if they don't, they're going to lose out on any opportunity to get any sort of money or settlement or anything like that. So in terms of what happens, I think I was always told that they're not sure if they're going to allow GME to skyrocket the way you'd want it to. It's going to be a slow melt up type of thing, probably similar to like what happened with Tesla. So all that, I mean, I made a long time ago a kind of like an exit calculator strategy that kind of helps you decide how do you decide these things. Because if you could remove the emotion out of it before you go to do your trading, trust me, it's really hard. Go ahead and try and sell one of your favorite stocks for the first time. It's really hard to do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
In some cases, you don't want to, right? What's selling around here?
And then it rips right after. Then you're
yes.
like, I'm never doing that again.
Yes. And oh my goodness, I can't tell you how many times that happens. But the whole point is you can't look at it that way. You have to look at it where you started to where you ended up after you sold and how much that made you. Don't look at what you lost, because the whole idea here is did it accomplish what you were looking to do? Those are the things you kind of have to work on, because with GME, you're going to have to make those decisions, and it might take you a while to figure it out. With something like Bed Bath & Beyond, AMC, Cost, all these other things that are just spurred up out of nowhere and going crazy with the basket,
right?
They're just going to one day decide to flick a switch and it's going to, and at that point, well, have fun, do whatever makes you happy.
Yeah, right on. Well said, man. Real quick. Yes. ABC. Let me read these tipsters real quick. Mikey with the 5. Gargle my freaking timber. We're not leaving. I'm not leaving. Shell, sell, then sell. DRS. Shout out PP. Emotional damage out there with the 5. The worst part of Whoopass DD ending is that we have to listen to Wally now. We also have Platypus out there with the 5. Thank you. Whoopass. One question. Why do you think they waited this long to deal with the 16B and the Bratya cases? I feel like you kind of touched upon it with like they're kind of suing and stuff like that, but if there's anything you want to add on to that user's comment, and then we'll take it to ABC, and then we'll let you go for the night.
I would say it is strategic in the sense from both sides, like from the people on the nefarious side, they're trying to drag this out to prevent it. They're trying to burn through cash. They're trying to prove any way they can that there's something that went wrong that doesn't legally allow this to transpire the way that the good guys want it to. Right. And from the good guys standpoint, it acts very similar to like corporate process. Like a lot of people don't realize this when you work in big organizations. The biggest dreadful thing is that you have to go through so much process to accomplish anything. It takes forever to get anything done. If you've ever had to deal with the government just to renew anything, there you go. But those very same processes are designed to also protect you in your job, to make sure they're not doing things that you aren't supposed to, or that nobody's allowed to ask things of you that isn't within the realm of that ask. And in this circumstance, I would say that the good guys are using the legalities to be able to withhold the information about their position and decide exactly when they want to share exactly what.
Well fucking said, man. ABC, take it away for us, man.
Yeah, I guess just one last question for you, brother. I have a thesis that obviously there's been a lot of fraud in RICO. There's been some third-party releases. I believe a lot of these people have kind of stepped to the table, negotiated a settlement, and obviously the outcome is going to be very, very favorable. In your opinion, do you think that there's going to be a cash settlement? Do you foresee a reissuance of equity, or do you see possibly more of a warrant type of approach? What are you forecast? What do you foresee in terms of the Bed Bath & Beyond stock? I 100% agree with you on the GameStop. I believe it'll be a controlled demolition. I believe it'll be a long run. And I think it'll just be kind of just up for GME. But in regards to Bed Bath, what do you foresee the outcome being in terms of the play?
It's really interesting because I think without some of the redactions that currently exist, it's hard to tell if they'll go the route of cash versus equity. Like, it really depends on how they view the scenario and whether they're actually getting the courts to give them what they want. I'm going to say that I suspect, based on all of the positivity we've seen from some of the key players, DFV, RK, and then RC himself, and some of the transcripts that we're seeing from the hearings, that I believe it is going in the direction that they wanted to. So from that standpoint, I do think that we're more likely to see some element of equity involved, which is the better thing, because that means that the positions with shorts is going to be amplified, whether it's because it gets reinstated as the stock and we're carried on for that ride, or because it turns into something new with either warrants or a new stock equity. The reason why I made reference earlier in the DD with that whole event associated to the other corporate events, and why I really like ChatGPT's unintentional explain it like I'm five reference to a toy store and extra goodies.
I like that.
It made a really explicit reference to how it needed to make sure that you, as the holder of the stock warrants, were allowed to get exactly what all the previous stockholders had and then the additional stuff, or you could choose to just take all the additional stuff, which means it sounds like there might be multiple types of rewards that are coming, maybe multiple stocks, multiple equities, and you might have a chance to decide what you're putting your money into.
Yep.
Who knows? Right? So, like, it's hard to tell because we don't have enough information on what action they would go. I definitely think that we have a high likelihood of getting some form of clawback that ends up in the RICO. The problem there is that is applicable to all the waterfall, unless any of those elements of the waterfall are shown to be colluding into the wrongdoing, which at this point, I think you're only looking at the banks, the JPM and the ABL people, and then the specific unsecured creditor bondholders. That's it. And that's not a lot. So I think for everybody else and all of the other creditors, they'll be a part of earnings, so that cash will be good. It'll be money in your pocket. It'll probably, for most people, restore whatever they've made in their initial investment and then some. Yeah. But for most of us, what we really care about is the equity portion and what sort of I think we really want to see more than anything the masterpiece of what Ryan Cohen has started here and transition this to change the way the market works.
Hey, fucking man. I like it. All right. You heard it from Whoopass Night. Whoopass, give us some closing thoughts for the chat out there, man. We have over 4,400 listeners tuning in across YouTube, Twitch, and also Twitter out there tonight. What would you like the good people at home to know, man, as we start to wrap up this evening? Whoopass, let's hear it, man.
First, I'm sorry that you had to deal with me on a Friday. Like, that just seems like the worst
loved it, man.
punishment possible.
We fucking loved it.
I appreciate every single one of you that took the time to be here, whether you understand it all only a little bit or you're just having a good time. You're a part of the movement, regardless of what contribution you're making. And if I were to leave something to everybody else here, I'd say, when this all transpires, don't forget where you come from. Don't forget why you got into this, why you stood so firmly in your belief system and endured what we have, regardless which stock you held, because there's going to be a lot of people that hurt. If this goes beyond just GME and the stock market itself. Like, there's countries going at war. You've got a whole bunch of, economic and political tensions that are happening. The world is, for all extensive purposes, turning into that everything is fine burning meme. And we are going to be some of the lucky few that get to come out of this with a hopeful future and the opportunity to be in control of what that looks like for ourselves. There's going to be a lot of other people who aren't, and who are going to be hurting because that's the way the system works. It abuses those people down at the pole. So when you finally do get to cross, take your R&R time. You're going to need it. If you decide to fuck off on an island because you've earned it, I'll friggin' cheers you for it, because good on you. Right. But when you're ready to come back to the table and put in more work, as our fearless leaders would say, just be kind and remember the people that could use your help.
Well fucking said, man. And we're still going to get those mojitos after this is done, man, on the beach. All right. So, all right, well, go ahead and wrap it up there, man. Whoopass, loved having you on the show tonight. Chat, let's get some love for Whoopass, man. And again, appreciate that presentation. And I will get with Whoopass as well, and we'll make sure those links work. And then we'll make sure to release that so everybody over the weekend can review that as well. So, Whoopass, loved having you on the show. Chat, let's get some love for Whoopass on his way out. Take care, man.
Cheers, brother.
Cheers, man. Love you.
Man, I gotta say, man, what a fucking fantastic show. I mean, we basically went the entire show talking about the presentation with Whoopass, and honestly, I enjoyed it, man. I'm glad that we kind of spent as much time as we could with HBC, with B. Riley, to really map out what was happening behind the scenes, and especially when he brings up a lot of this data, right? Like with these option contracts and Cerebus and all this shit, man. And I know Michael's going to be running with that all weekend. But again, I got to say, what a fantastic show. And to be honest with you, I think that we're just going to start wrapping up there for tonight. I don't really want to add a bunch of stuff to the show. I want to keep it as it is for tonight. Let this be an exclusive whoop-ass episode tonight that people can look on in history, man, being one of the greatest episodes that we ever had here.
Let's go!
Right. Mrs. BB just got home. Right on. Appreciate the love. Let's go ahead and start wrapping up there. I know Control Chaos wanted to add something on the way out. Control, let's hear it, man, as we start to wrap up this tonight's episode tonight.
Yeah, so I was talking to Michael earlier, and then I called Jake after that and spoke, and talking about the remaining court dates. And Jake brought something to my attention that I'm not sure everybody else is tracking. He said that essentially the court has given the Brandon Meadows case till 20 August to present a motion to continue the case, or they're going to just drop it. What they've also done is take an additional step that said, hey, if you choose to continue the case, you need to be ready with a lawyer in court on the 27th of August for us to hear your case, and then they'll make a decision on that day. So I have offered Jake, I'm not sure if he's going to be able to accept, that if it does get continued on the 20th, we should know by the 21st or 22nd, the way that stuff's usually updated and uploaded, that I'll pay to fly him in and pick him up and pay for hotel and all that, and we'll go to the court case together on the 27th. Because if you really look at this and you listen to the last two court hearings, the one, I forget the gentleman that went to it, and then the one Spurious listened in on, it seems like there's really an effort to get everything wrapped up in August. The judge has refused to, let MJL's case go past August and all these other cases. So I think I see all this as super bullish, and I didn't know if everybody was tracking those dates and that information, so I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, well said. And I want to add too, in the Brandon Meadows, I know ABC has been kind of going back and forth. ABC still, he believes that there's a possibility that maybe Brandon Meadows is, I think what you were saying was that there's a possibility that maybe someone is like using it as like smoke and mirrors or things like that. Me personally, I think the guy is absolutely fucking nuts. I would like to think that maybe it is a smoke and mirrors type of scenario, which I don't know. I mean, I guess you never really know, but go ahead, ABC, if you want to add on to the Brandon Meadows stuff.
No, I just wanted to add to what Control was saying there is, yes, absolutely. August 20th is the date. And if he does decide to fight it, it'll be the 27th. Also keep in mind that 6th Street, as the DIP senior lender or the DIP provider, also is looking to be paid by the end of August as well. So it kind of confirms that notion that things want to get wrapped up by the end of this month. So that's really bullish in a sense that you're trying to see, basically any claims, any clawbacks, any payments to all kind of conclude at the end of the month. So I just appreciate what Control was saying, because that is really kind of the theme, and you kind of see that in the court cases too, that they do want to just wrap this up. So
And
I
then
appreciate
you
that.
you also have the GME earnings call projected either 4 through 9 September. And they're not going to want to go into that earnings call without an explanation as to why they did 2 ATMs and diluted stockholders and stuff like that. But here's the thing that I'm baffled by is like how they let even people like MJL and Brandon Meadows submit documents to a fucking court with fake names.
I think that's where you're and Whoopass kind of referred to it, is that Judge Papilia and the other judge have just been so welcoming to both sides that they are almost kind of giving a positive situation where nobody can come back later and challenge them, where they have offered, MGL, offered Neil Dales. They've offered every opposition the chance to make good with what they're trying to come forth with. And that to me is really beneficial, because it's just going to limit any objections or any issues down the road where they were just so impartial and they looked under every rock. They allowed every opportunity. They gave multiple chances. And to me, that's like Whoopass said, a tip of the hat to the judiciary system and the people at the bench right now.
And one thing actually that on a post that Jake did,
Beautifully said,
and he said he liked the line of thinking is that if he was trying to block the deal and he thought like $1 billion would block it, and then there was enough money from the third party release and the settlement that it would still cover that, it could still like go forward without that. It's like kind of interesting. Then it's like then to add 10 more billion to try and block it, that kind of shows the kind of relative quantity of how much might be in that settlement. And so that'd be pretty cool if that means that in that third party release like settlement fund, there's maybe 10 or 11 billion dollars, because only 1.6 of that is debt, and the rest, no one else can receive more than 100%. So the rest would have to come to shareholders.
Yeah, I don't know.
And I don't.
Real quick on that point, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
It almost seems as though the people that may have tried to put that up as a smokescreen, as a blocker, filing that first 1 billion, then 10 billion as an admin claim, almost as a long shot, a Hail Mary, saying, let's see if we can corrupt a judge in this scenario to be able to have that money come to us by way of the admin claim, so there's nothing left for Class 6 or Class 9. And if that gets kicked out of the way, it's almost like that shield is gone.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an indication of the money that we will end up seeing coming down through the class list.
And I do want to add as well that when it comes to the Brandon Meadows too, like if it ends up being a false type of claim, like I was under the assumption that when they kind of do this and they hold up the bankruptcy by filing these claims, that you can be charged, right? Like criminally, I think, for filing these claims. So that will really be the biggest thing is, whenever they kind of wrap up this claim, are they or are they not going to file something criminally against Brandon Meadows for, almost like delaying this? Because look, it's one thing to put a claim in for like 150,000, 200,000 or something like that, right? $500,000. It's a whole nother ballgame to be putting in a claim for $10 billion. I mean, I have no idea how they're going to essentially address this, but if I had to guess, just to answer Controlled Chaos's question, I think by August 20th, it's going to most likely be tossed out. I do think that it is just some whack job based off what I was reading, based off what he's talking about in this stuff. We did have a guy who came on the show. I can't remember his name, but he was pointing out that the guy was even claiming his car alone was like worth $10 million or something like that. It was just absolutely crazy ass ramblings of a lunatic, but I don't know. Go ahead, ABC.
PB, real quick.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, ABC. I agree with everything you said, but I also think that the part that can't make sense is that, well, first of all, I think they need to get rid of it before the final credit bid can happen, because otherwise the money would have to be paid out. If that case was to ever be won somehow, that would have to be paid out, and no one's going to want to put a credit bid in if you're going to owe that money. The second thing I wanted to say is I question the timing of it, because this has been known for over a year, I believe, and they waited till this point of the play to bring it forward, and then they're like forcing it to go through. I think it'll be dismissed on the 20th, but I think that they know what they're doing, and it's all been just like sitting there waiting for, them to dot their I's and cross their T's and put a bow on it before they fucking deliver a baby.
Yeah, that's a great way to fucking say it. Yeah.
Well, imagine this. Imagine there were thousands or tens of thousands of people closely following these court cases, right? Like this is something that, like an admin claim that could be swept under the rug in a bankruptcy where no one's paying attention. But with all the eyeballs on this, all of the retail focus, this is under the microscope, right? Like this is going to get thrown out because it's objectively nuts. But if no one's looking at it, it doesn't matter. No one cares, and the bad guys win. But visibility, shining light on things, that visibility drives accountability, right?
Well, 100%. Yeah, absolutely, it does. Go ahead, ABC.
In no way am I saying that the Brandon claim has merit. What I'm trying to say is, and absolutely, you look at the claim, you read it, and you're blown away. Like, how does this even make its way into the court system, let alone be put aside for so long? And then his second claim for over 10 billion was accepted after the claim date was passed. So why would they even allow it? Because it didn't even hit the deadline. It was literally in October that it was filed.
Yeah, that is bizarre.
And so it caused a lot of questions. I guess it brings me back to the tinfoil that his first claim was on 714. Okay, tinfoil. Okay, his total amount looked like his original claim looked like $1 billion. And when you see the second claim, well, that looks like a 10% deposit on a stalking horse bid. Okay, shit. The 11.8 matches the share buybacks. Shit. The 11.8 matches approximately what Sixth Street Specialty Lending raised in a private equity, which I suspect to be Teddy. Shit, the 11.8 equals what Carl refinanced all his holdings for.
That I don't fucking understand how that's even possible. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird.
You look at
man.
it and you just go, there's something here, or it's just complete bullshit. And that's the only thing I was trying to provoke was a little bit of discussion on that.
Right.
But we'll find out on the 20th.
If that's the amount, though, that could be
point.
what they know they have to block. So they're like, oh, crap, like we need that exact amount to block it.
Yeah.
It's
ABC's
also,
right. Yeah.
It's also possible that this is something that the courts intentionally allowed for the same reason that they've been, acting impartial, so that if somebody comes along and says, hey, this, you didn't do enough, it's like, well, we let this like ridiculously huge claim come in like way after the fact. It's like, we're being more than flexible. We're being more than reasonable. Yeah. So you don't have a leg to stand on. That could also be an angle to look at this from.
Yeah, well said. All right, we'll start wrapping up the show tonight. Blair out there with the 20. Appreciate the love, Blair. I seem to remember Judge P specifically ruling between lawsuits, throwing at this Chapter 11 that they had to specifically go through his court for approval only, which I do recall as well. Blair is absolutely correct on that. Bill G out there with a 2. Wait, what's the payout? It's to be continued, man. All right, let's take it over to Control. Control, closing thoughts, man, for the good people at home. Let's hear it tonight, man.
No, I think I'd have to say that, again, Whoopass did an amazing job. It was a great show. And I just can't wait to watch the documentary because I'm confused as hell. So cool. But I do know we won. And it's just a matter of when it's over. So
right on. All right, you heard it from Control. Chat, let's get some love for Control on his way out. Appreciate having you on the show. Take care, man. All right, let's take it over to Anasthera. Anasthera, let's hear it tonight, man. What would you like the good people at home to know as we start to wrap up tonight's episode?
No, there's no real act to follow that from Whoopass. Like nothing can compare, right? But we got a lot of interesting stuff happening in the next few weeks, and I too am excited, not just for the documentary, but maybe for the chance to like sit down and have a beer with some of these guys and just talk to them what it was like going through all the stuff we went through, but from their perspective, right?
Yep.
Like, what did they see? Like, what did they think of the shit we were doing? Like, oh man, that's gonna be so great. I can't wait for that shit. So
right on.
Looking
all right,
forward
cool.
to it.
You heard it from Anasthera tonight. Anasthera, appreciate having you on the show. Chat, let's get some love for Anasthera on his way out. Take care, man. Enjoy the weekend.
Peace out.
See ya. If we had fucking Jake and Whoopass on at the same time on the same episodes, everyone's TVs at home would burst into flames, man. I mean, nobody's internet would be able to handle that, man. Let's take it over to Wally Buck. Wally Buck, let's hear it, man. Closing thoughts as we start to wrap up.
I'm just grateful to be here with you guys. I'm grateful to be a shareholder. I'm grateful to and anticipating what's coming. I think we're close, and I am specifically grateful to have been here tonight because this show was bonkers.
I'm glad you came.
I was actively paying attention the whole time, and I know I'm going to have to listen to this 3 or 4 times, just like with windshield time, going to bed at night. There's just so much content. So because it's all so complex, HBC, B. Riley, like what's going, like it's there's so much going on. So it's going to take me a lot of time to digest what Whoopass put together. And I'm very grateful that he came with the big guns. He presented it logically, structured. We had a PowerPoint for the whole show tonight. That's, that takes us back to the Plur days, right? So
it does.
Just happy to be here. Love you guys. Love you all. And to the moon we go.
Cool.
See ya.
Right on. Chat, let's get some love for Wally Buck on his way out. Appreciate having you on the show, Wally. Take care. All right, let's take it over to Michael. Michael, let's hear it tonight, man. What would you like the good people at home to know as we start to wrap up and we head into a long weekend, man? Let's hear it.
Man, Whoopass really got the wheels turning. Definitely got some rabbit holes. Just got to keep finding Epstein everywhere. But that and Mark Triton and everyone else. But one thing, I think that there's really something to that, like the Canadian side of it, because there was an amendment to that, the credit that they pulled up on, or what was it, the AK? I got to read the AK, right?
Yes.
Where it said that there was what was it, cash dominion, which is like a default, and then they amended that out and then said it was a cash dominion period. And so it's like, I think that it's possible that like money came in from Canada side and they did their bankruptcy first. And so then they put the money up to pay off the ABL or something, which is like really, really fascinating. But anyway, I'm really excited. And, someone in the chat asked about options. And for me, I flipped my options. And so I sold one and I bought two, $25 strike prices for October 18th, I think is what I got. So,
nice. Those have a good chance of printing.
Yeah. But
cool.
Anyway, I love you all. We have an amazing team. And I'll see you all later.
Right on. All right. You heard it from Michael tonight. Chat. Let's get some love for Michael on his way out. ABC, let's hear it, man. I'm glad you came here tonight. This will go down. This episode alone will go down in absolute history, man, in my opinion. I mean, again, like B. Riley, Syracuse, fucking HBC. I mean, we still have no idea what HBC was essentially doing, right? There's so many redactions and all of this stuff. So ABC, let's hear it, man, as we start to wrap up and we head into the weekend. What would you like the good people at home to know, my man?
Yeah, it was a fantastic show, and I am glad that I joined you fine gentlemen tonight. I mean, I love the fact that Whoopass took the time on a vacation to ink that slideshow. I mean, literally that's commitment. But what I more appreciate is, last February when HBC showed up, I was all gung ho on them, no, these guys are here to help us. They're way hats. And I always operate from a very high macro speculative type of assumption, thesis. My paradigms of thought are not very micro. And then you get brilliant people like Whoopass, Jake 2B, many others in the community.
ABC.
Yeah, but these guys go and they dig the hardcore, deep micro stuff that allows it to have merit. Whereas I just kind of see on a big picture, and you get somebody like this that comes along and says, HBC did this in this time frame. I mean, I remember sitting back there in March of last year, watching the stock, looking at the buy-sell rate, looking at the volume, going, this isn't fucking possible. This is RICO. Somebody's got to be screenshotting this because something's going on. And yet I never took the time to dig in deep and do the homework or collect that data that I should have done at the time, because I was already convinced in my mind that, HBC is good. The reverse split was going to happen. The main auctions were going to be canceled. So to see somebody put in that hard work and it kind of align with where I've been, it just really warms my heart that there's so many people in this community that have offered so much different perspective and insight and homework and due diligence. And that's what I think really sets retail apart, is that, like Larry said, when you get a community of this size and magnitude, they are more powerful than some of these big institutions out there. 100%. And I think these institutions are starting to realize that the stock market is actually built for retail. It's not built for the, for the politicians or insiders. The stock market should be for retail. And with the tip of technology that we have, and the X and spaces, and it's now hitting that point where literally, if the system does change, and I believe we're on that route to change, this is going to be an incredible avenue to witness, not only be a part of, but obviously, sharing the rewards of. So I feel blessed to be a part of this. I feel blessed to know so many fine people that have contributed in the community. And I just thank you for the opportunity, PP.
Right on. Anytime. You'll always have a home here at the PP Show, man. So ABC, love to hear it, man. Excellent stuff that you had to add on tonight. And again, I think that this is going to wrap up real soon for us, man, in our favor. So ABC, enjoy the rest of the night. Chat, let's get some love for ABC on his way out. ABC, please enjoy the weekend, man. Hope to see you next week, man.
Cheers, brother.
Take care. All right, there you have it, man. The fucking PP Show. I gotta say, one of the best episodes out there, period, man. And I know a lot of you guys out there want to get your hands on that presentation that we have. I will get with Whoopass maybe by tomorrow. We'll make sure everything's cleaned up. I'll get another copy of it, and we will submit that for people out there that want to get their eyes on it as well. So,
With that being said, we're going to wrap up tonight. Closing tips on the way out. Appreciate the love tonight, fellas. Lost with the 2. Michael, that's a huge mic. We also got Blair out there with the 20. When I know I sympathize with in the desert under RC. Oops, I meant Moas. All right. We also got Loss out there with the 2. We can't all be wrong, 1 or 2, but thousands. All right. Right on, man. We're going to wrap up the show there again. Appreciate your guys' support, man. Whether you watch the show, you donate, whatever it may be, I appreciate you guys tuning into the show tonight. I got to say, a fantastic fire episode. And again, it will be here for anybody that wants to rewatch it. Again, Lost with the 2 on the way out. I take shots every time PP misreads word. You must be absolutely trash that, man. All right, we're going to wrap up there. Enjoy the dildo slap on the way out. Appreciate the love, fellas. And we will see you guys on Monday. Enjoy the goddamn weekend, fellas, and keep your head up. Something is happening here behind the scenes. Enjoy the dildo slap on the way out. We'll see you guys Monday. Take care. Peace.